Hey Reddit, I need to get this off my chest. My name's Ella, and what's about to unfold is something I'm still processing. You ever feel like you've done so much for your family, and they turn around and treat you like you're a walking ATM? Well, let me take you back to when it all started. For context, I'm in my late 20s, and I have a decent job in tech. It's not glamorous, but it pays well enough that I can travel, indulge a little, and keep my life relatively stress-free. But for the last few years, every time my family went on vacation, somehow, I became the one footing the bill. It all began innocently enough. I started out paying for small things, meals here and there when they visited, an occasional birthday gift that wasn't quite enough to make me feel like I was being used. Then, one year, my family decided to go to the Bahamas for a vacation. It was supposed to be a family reunion of sorts, and I thought, why not? I'll cover a few expenses. You know, like helping them with the flights or covering the house rental. But that was just the beginning point. 1 year turned into 2, then 3, and suddenly, I was paying for the entire vacation. Every year. Flights, accommodations, the works. The thing is, I never asked for this. I never even offered. It just kind of happened. First, it was my parents, then my siblings, and eventually, my cousins jumped in. All of a sudden, I was the go-to person for travel money. And don't get me started on the guilt trips. It was always, Ella, we know you have the money. You're doing so well in your career. We can't afford it, and you know we need this time together as a family. You don't mind, right? Every time I felt uneasy about it, I'd push those feelings aside. I'd tell myself it wasn't a big deal because family is family, right? But after the 5th year of paying for everyone's vacation without ever receiving so much as a thank you, I started to feel, well, a little taken advantage of. I finally snapped when I received a text one day from my mom that I can't forget. I had just come back from a grueling work trip and was lying on my couch, catching up on sleep. My phone buzzed, and it was from my mom. Hey sweetie, we're planning our next trip. Just wanted to let you know it's going to be another expensive one. But don't worry, your dad and I already talked, and we've got it covered. She went on and on about how excited everyone was and how much they were looking forward to it. I didn't respond right away. I was tired, but something felt off. It didn't sit right with me that they had it covered. Yet I was always the one handing out the cash. Then, that afternoon, I got a group message from my dad. It was one of those family chats where everyone chimes in, and the topic was the vacation. As usual, they were planning everything. But this time, the conversation turned into something that I couldn't ignore. My uncle, who's notorious for being blunt, casually typed in, Ella won't mind paying for this one either. She's always been our cash cow, haha. Now, I don't know what hit me harder, the fact that he called me a cash cow or the fact that my parents, my own parents, let that comment slide. No response, no call out, nothing. The message just hung there like an elephant in the room. They didn't even acknowledge it. And here I was, the one who had been paying for the trips for years, and this was the thanks I got. For a minute, I was in shock. I reread the message a few times, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. They were all in on it. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a walking bank. It was like I'd been hit by a wave of realization. My generosity was being taken for granted. I didn't respond to the message. I just stared at the screen, my mind racing. That's when I made a decision. I was going to let them pay for this vacation themselves. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. I didn't even hint at it. I just stayed silent, waiting for them to come to me when the time came. Fast forward to the day the next trip was supposed to be booked. My mom texted me again. Hey Ella, we're all set for the Bahamas next month. We were thinking of upgrading to a bigger house, and we were hoping you could help with the extra expenses. You know, we really need this getaway. The message was full of the usual guilt. But this time, I didn't respond right away. I waited a few hours, and then I did something I never thought I'd do. I sent them a message. I think it's time you all handle it on your own this year. I've been covering for the last few years, and it's time you all pitch in. I can't keep doing this. And then, I sat back, waiting. I didn't get an immediate reply. I didn't hear from anyone for a while, and that's when things started getting really tense. The phone calls started coming in the next day. My mom, my dad, and even my siblings, all asking the same question, what do you mean? You're really not going to help? The more they called, the more I realized how deep the entitlement ran. Ella, come on, my mom pleaded. We've always helped you when you needed us. This is family. We can't afford it without you. I didn't ask you to help me all these years. I snapped back. You just assumed, and I let it slide. But I'm done. The tension was thick, and I knew it was going to get worse. But what happened next? Well, that's where things took a turn. The next morning, I received a message that would change everything. The message I received the next morning was from my dad, and it wasn't what I expected at all. It was brief, but it hit me like a punch in the gut. Ella, I need you to come to the house. Your mother and I need to talk. Now, I wasn't exactly thrilled about the prospect of sitting down with them, especially after what had just happened. But I knew avoiding this conversation would only make it worse. So, I drove to their house, my stomach in knots. When I walked in, my mom was sitting at the kitchen table, her arms crossed, looking more serious than I'd ever seen her. Dad was pacing back and forth, clearly agitated. Ella, you don't understand, my dad started. We didn't want to ask you for money again. But this is different. We've always helped you, and now it's your turn. I could feel my heart racing. I've been helping you for years. I don't know how many times I've paid for flights and trips and houses, but I can't keep doing it. It's not fair. Mom sighed. You've always been the one with the money, Ella. Why are you being so difficult? We've always done this together. This is just a little help, a little favor for the family. Why are you making it such a big deal? Her words stung, but I bit my lip and stayed calm. It's not just a little help anymore. It's always me, and I'm tired of it. You're our daughter. You should want to help us. You owe us, Dad suddenly snapped, his voice rising. The word, "oh," made my blood boil. I don't owe anyone anything, I said, struggling to keep my composure. I've helped because I wanted to, but that's not the same as being taken for granted. My mom's eyes narrowed, and she got up from the table, walking toward me. So you're saying you won't help your family when we need you? After everything we've done for you? You're just going to abandon us? Her voice cracked, and I could see her trying to manipulate me with guilt, but I wasn't having it anymore. No, I'm not abandoning you. I'm just saying no. You all can handle it on your own this time. For a moment, the room was silent. I could feel the tension rising, but I wasn't backing down. Then, my dad, his face flushed with anger, slammed his fist on the table. You selfish little brat. We raised you to be better than this. What happened to the Ella who cared about her family? He shouted. My mom immediately jumped in, trying to back up his words. This is the thanks we get for supporting you all these years? I stood there, my heart pounding. I was done. I had been walking on eggshells for too long, doing things to keep the peace, but this was it. It wasn't just the money. It was the way they saw me, not as their daughter, but as their financial safety net. I turned to leave, but as I reached for the door, my dad stopped me. Ella, if you walk out of here now, don't bother coming back. We're done. I didn't say a word. I just walked out. The next few days were interesting, to say the least. My phone was blowing up with messages and calls from my parents, my siblings, even a few distant relatives. But this time, it wasn't just about the vacation. It was about everything I'd ever done for them. My oldest brother, Mark, called me first. Ella, what the hell is going on? Why are you being such a diva about this? We've always helped each other out. I snapped back, yeah, always me helping out. I've had enough. Mark sighed. This isn't you. What's the real problem? Why are you being like this? I wasn't going to let him gaslight me into thinking I was in the wrong, so I laid it out. The real problem is that every time we go on vacation, I end up paying for everything. And no one even cares. I've been the family ATM for years, and you all just assume I'll cover it. I could hear the hesitation in his voice. But we're family, Ella. You're supposed to help family. Help family? I couldn't help myself. You know what's funny? You've never helped me when I needed it. I've always been the one carrying all the weight. Mark didn't respond, but I could tell I had struck a nerve. It was silent for a beat before he said, okay, fine. But don't say I didn't warn you when it all blows up. That was the first taste of what was to come. It wasn't just my parents. It was the entire family turning on me. Every time I checked my phone, there was a new message, a new guilt trip, a new threat of what would happen if I didn't come through. But the thing is, I was past the point of caring. I had been pushed to my limit, and I wasn't going to fold. But the real kicker came when they all started talking behind my back. Literally. I found out through one of my cousins that my parents had sent a message to the rest of the family about me. They were making it seem like I was the unreasonable one. Ella's being selfish, they said. She doesn't care about family anymore. It was a smear campaign, and it was working. Everyone started turning against me. I was the villain now. A few weeks went by, and I was starting to feel the weight of everything. My phone had become a constant source of stress, but I didn't respond to anyone. I kept my distance. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from my dad. I was in the middle of work, but I answered anyway. I had a feeling this was the moment things were about to take a turn for the worse. "Ella, listen," my dad said, his tone much softer than it had been before. "I'm sorry. Your mom and we've been thinking. Maybe we've pushed too far. Maybe we didn't appreciate everything you've done." I almost laughed, but I didn't. This wasn't about an apology. This was about saving face. "You think?" There was a long pause before he spoke again. "We need you for the trip. You know we can't do it without you." I wasn't going to make it easy for him. "I think you should figure it out on your own. You always said we were family." Well, family helps each other without expecting everything in return. "Please, Ella. We're sorry," he begged. "Just this once." And that's when I decided to play my hand. I knew exactly how this was going to end. But what did I do next? As soon as my dad said those words, "just this once," I felt my patience snap. I wasn't going to be the one to fix their mess this time. I had done it for years, and every single time. It felt like they took advantage of me, never appreciating the sacrifices I made. I sat there, gripping the phone, taking deep breaths. "Dad, I've been saying no for weeks now. Why do you think I'm going to change my mind just because you're begging?" There was silence on the other end. Then, my dad's voice grew more defensive. "I don't know what happened to you. You used to be different. What happened to the Ella who cared about family?" That old guilt trip again. But I wasn't falling for it. Maybe I was the one who cared too much. Maybe it's time for you all to see what life is like without me paying your bills. I could hear him trying to calm himself down. "Ella, you're overreacting. We're just asking for help with a trip. We've done so much for you." "Done for me?" I shot back. "I've done more for you than you've ever done for me. I paid for your vacations, your bills, your new car. And now, suddenly, I'm the one being selfish because I'm not going to fund your next trip? You don't get to twist this into being about me. This is about you all being so entitled that you think it's okay to use me like this." There was a long pause. I could tell my dad didn't have a response, but I wasn't finished. I was tired of being painted as the villain in their narrative. "You've taken me for granted, Dad. All these years, I've been the cash cow, as you've so kindly put it. And you know what? That stops now." "I don't believe this," he said, his voice cracking. "You've changed so much. You don't care anymore. You're not the daughter I raised." "You're right," I snapped. "I'm not the daughter you raised. I'm someone who knows better than to let people walk all over me anymore. But I guess you won't learn that until it hits you." And just like that, I hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with everything that had happened. The constant phone calls, the guilt trips, the barrage of angry messages from my relatives. It felt like they were all turning on me, calling me selfish, saying I was throwing away years of family loyalty. It was suffocating, and I was starting to feel isolated. The next morning, I got a text from my mom. It was a simple but telling one. "Ella, you've hurt us. We've been trying to make things right, but you're pushing us away. Is money really more important than family?" I sat there staring at the message for a long time. I could feel my anger bubbling up again. Money was not the issue. It was the manipulation, the constant using of me, the never-ending assumption that I was always going to be their solution to everything. I wanted to respond, but I decided to wait. I had to think this through carefully. I needed them to understand the gravity of what they were doing, and I needed them to realize they couldn't always depend on me to bail them out. A few days later, my parents sent me a message, one that was different from the others. It was an invitation to their house. They said they wanted to talk and make things right. I knew what this was. Another attempt at manipulation. I felt a sense of resolve in me. They thought they could just pull me back in with a few empty words. They didn't know that this time, I was going to make sure they felt the consequences of their actions. I showed up at their house, but I wasn't prepared for what happened next. My dad opened the door, and before I could say a word, he stepped aside to let me in. Ella, we've been thinking, he began. We've been too hard on you. And we just wanted to say, we're sorry. We didn't mean to make you feel like a cash cow. I had to stifle a laugh. He was trying so hard to sound genuine, but I could see right through him. You know, that's funny, I said, my voice calm, almost too calm. I've been saying no for weeks now, and all of a sudden, you're sorry? You're really trying to pull the wool over my eyes with this, aren't you? Ella, we mean it, my mom chimed in. We were wrong. We just didn't realize how much you were carrying. Oh, you didn't? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Because for years, I've been telling you how much I'm doing. But you all only ever saw me as the one who could fix everything. There was an uncomfortable silence. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but I wasn't done yet. I had something planned, something they would never expect. I've been thinking about your trip, I continued, leaning forward. And you know what? I've decided I'm not going to pay for it. But here's the kicker. I paused, watching them both closely. I could see the panic in their eyes. They were finally starting to realize they weren't going to win me over with a quick apology. You can't afford it. I'm not coming to your rescue this time. You'll have to find another way to make it happen. I've already decided I'm done being your safety net. I stood up, and just as I was about to leave, my dad, looking defeated, spoke. Ella, please don't do this. I didn't say another word. I walked out, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction, but I knew this wasn't over. They had no idea what I was about to do next. I didn't say another word. I walked out, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction, but I knew this wasn't over. They had no idea what I was about to do next. For the next few days, I let the silence hang between us. My parents sent me messages, of course, but I didn't bother reading them. They were all the same, pleas for me to come back, to forgive them, to be the family I once was. Honestly, it felt good to finally not respond, to not feel like I owed them an explanation. But what I didn't expect was what happened next. One evening, about a week after the confrontation, I was sitting at home, scrolling through some emails, when I got a call from my dad. I stared at the phone, hesitation in my chest. Part of me wanted to just let it ring out, but another part, a part one couldn't ignore, knew this was the moment. The moment where things would either break completely or take a different turn. I answered. Ella, my dad said, his voice trembling just enough to make me pause. We need to talk. About what? I replied, trying to keep my tone as calm as possible, though my heart was racing. You know, I'm sorry for what happened, but we've been talking. Your mother and I. We can't just sit back and let you throw everything away like this. You're part of this family. You owe us. His voice had that familiar edge to it, that one that always tried to make me feel guilty, like I was the one causing the problems. I almost laughed, but I bit it back. I don't owe you anything. You've used me for years, and I'm done with it. This isn't about family. It's about you being upset that your free ride just ended. There was a long pause. I could hear him sigh heavily on the other end. Ella, we've had a plan. A big plan. Something we were going to share with you after we got back from our trip, but I guess it's pointless now. I narrowed my eyes, unsure whether I should feel alarmed or amused. A plan? What? You're going to try to guilt trip me into coming with you on your next vacation? No, he replied, his voice turning serious. It's more than that. We were going to give you a percentage of the inheritance early. We know you've been struggling, and we thought you might want to use it to get yourself back on track. But now? Forget it. I froze. My brain struggled to process what he was saying. An inheritance? Early? Wait, I said slowly. You were going to give me money? After all of this? There was an almost bitter laugh on the other end of the line. We didn't want you to feel like we only saw you as a cash cow, Ella. We thought maybe this would help you understand that we cared about you. I sat there for a second, stunned. The audacity. The absolute nerve of them. After everything, they thought money would be enough to fix it? They thought I would cave just because they were throwing some cash my way. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. Keep your inheritance. It's too little, too late. You can't buy me back, not this time. You'll regret this, my dad spat. We won't be here forever. You'll come crawling back when you realize what you lost. I hung up, and for a moment, it felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. But I knew that wasn't the end. Oh no. They wouldn't let me walk away that easily. I was right. A few days later, as I was sitting on my couch, minding my own business, I got an email. At first, I thought it was from work or maybe spam, but when I opened it, my stomach dropped. The subject line was simple. We need to talk about this. It was from my mother. I opened it. It was a long message, full of anger and hurt. But what caught my attention was the last line. You'll see just how much family means when we're gone. I didn't understand. What did she mean by that? I checked my phone, but there were no calls, no messages. Still, the weight of that sentence lingered. When we're gone. Then, something clicked. They were going to cut me out. They were going to make me the villain in all of this, and they were going to play the victim. They were going to turn every friend, every relative, against me if they had to. They weren't just mad that I refused to pay for their vacation anymore. They were hurt because they lost their source of income. And they were going to make sure I felt the consequences of it. I wasn't going to let them. Not this time. If they wanted to play dirty, I was ready to fight back. A week later, I saw a post from my mom. It was on Facebook, shared with all of our family and friends. It was a picture of my parents smiling at a resort, holding drinks in their hands. But the caption? That was the kicker. Sometimes you have to learn the hard way that family doesn't always have your back. Just because you give doesn't mean you'll receive. Be careful who you trust. I stared at it for a while, the words sinking in. They weren't just trying to punish me. They were trying to publicly shame me, make me look like the bad guy in front of everyone. And that was where they made their mistake. Because now, I had a plan. I stared at my mom's Facebook post, feeling my anger simmering beneath the surface. This wasn't just about the vacation anymore. They were playing dirty, trying to paint me as the villain in front of everyone. It hit me hard, but I wasn't about to let them get away with it. I knew what I had to do. I spent the next couple of days pulling everything together. I had all the evidence I needed. Text messages, bank statements, and emails. Everything that showed just how much I had given them over the years. They'd been more than just entitled. They'd been manipulative, using guilt to get me to pay for their vacations, their bills, everything. But now I had the receipts, and I was going to make sure everyone knew the truth. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I shared a post of my OWNIT was a simple status with a picture of my parents at one of their previous vacations, the same one my mom had posted, but with a twist. I attached a screenshot of a text message from my dad where he literally said, "She won't mind paying for the trip. It's her job to help us." Then I added the message, "To everyone who's been wondering what's really been going on with my family lately, here's the truth. For years, I've been paying for vacations, bills, and things that I wasn't even asked for. It wasn't out of love. It was because I was guilted and manipulated. I'm done. No one gets to use me anymore." The post went up, and within hours, it was shared by dozens of family members and friends. People I hadn't even heard from in years were messaging me, asking what had happened. Some were supportive, others were shocked. But the most important part? My parents couldn't escape it. The fallout was almost immediate. Why, Mom called me, frantic. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. "You've ruined everything. People are asking questions, and now they think we used you. We were helping you." "Helping me?" I scoffed. "You were using me. Don't twist the truth to make yourself look better. The only thing you ever helped me with was enabling me to keep paying for your lives while you ignored mine." She didn't have a comeback for that. She just hung up. But the drama didn't stop there. The entire family was in an uproar, with relatives reaching out, calling me everything from selfish to entitled. My parents were doing damage control, trying to spin things in their favor, but it was clear they couldn't recover from the truth I had exposed. The reality was out, and there was no going back. A few days later, I got an unexpected call from my uncle, who was one of the few relatives who had always been supportive of me. "Ella, I saw your post. You did the right thing," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "We've all known about your parents' manipulation, but no one had the guts to say it. You've got family here who actually cares about you, and will support you, no matter what." Hearing that honestly brought me to tears. I'd always been told that family was supposed to have your back, but until then, I didn't realize just how much support I had from people who truly cared. By the end of the week, my parents had tried to reach out, but this time, I didn't answer. The games they'd been playing for years were finally over. I was done being their cash cow, and I had made sure that everyone knew exactly who they were. The truth had come out, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. My name's Alex. I'm 28, live in the city, and until recently, drove a dusty 2010 Corolla that made a strange wheezing noise every time it hit 60. I used to laugh about it with coworkers. The old man's still got fight in him, I'd say. But I can't lie. Every time I parked that car outside my apartment, I felt small. Not because I was ashamed of being practical. I worked hard, saved money, and lived beneath my means. No, I felt small because my family had a way of making me feel like no matter what I did, I was never quite enough. It started way back, honestly. I was the quiet one in a loud family. The one who preferred books to parties, internships to vacations, and simple routines over chaos. My sister, Alyssa, 2 years older, was the family star. Always dressed to the nines. Always dating someone rich or important or both. She got a business degree from some expensive school my parents helped fund, even though she barely passed. But she knew how to play the part. Fake it till you make it, right? And my parents, especially Mom, absolutely adored her for it. My Uncle Tony, Mom's younger brother, was the kind of guy who bragged about buying stock in crypto before it was cool and told the same 3 stories every Thanksgiving. He made his money in real estate flipping, or so he said, though no one ever quite knew how he kept affording new Rolexes. He had that booming, sarcastic voice that made you feel like he was always mocking you, even when he was joking. So yeah, family gatherings? Not exactly a confidence booster, but I still showed up. Maybe part of me hoped one day they'd see me differently. Respect the fact that I built something for myself, on my own, without cutting corners. I've been working in tech the past few years. I started as a junior backend developer, grinding away through late nights and unpaid overtime, trying to prove I belonged in a field where everyone else seemed to have Ivy League diplomas and startup equity. Eventually, I found my groove. I took a risk 2 years ago and joined a stealth startup with barely any funding. It was a gamble. I lived off ramen and dollar coffee, shared a shoebox apartment with peeling paint and a broken radiator. But the gamble paid off. Last November, the company got acquired for a jaw-dropping sum. And thanks to the shares I held, quietly, humbly, I became a millionaire overnight. But I didn't rush to show it. I still lived in that same tiny apartment. I still drove the old man. I kept my head down, reinvested most of what I had, and bought a few things here and there. I wanted to be smart, strategic, not flashy. That's just how I've always been. Still, something in me wanted closure. I'd spent years being underestimated, mocked even, by my own flesh and blood. And the truth is, no matter how much you grow, some part of you still craves validation from the people who raised you, who made you feel like you were never quite enough. So when Mom texted me about the upcoming family brunch at Uncle Tony's new house, a 3-story glass monstrosity in the suburbs, part of me groaned, but another part whispered, "This is your chance." She said it like an order, not a request. Sunday, 11 a.m. sharp. Everyone's coming. We're something nice. I almost didn't reply, but after a minute I sent back, "Sure, I'll be there." I hadn't seen any of them in over a year. Not since Christmas, when Alyssa casually asked if I was still coding in my pajamas all day while flicking caviar off her fingernails. That night ended with Dad pulling me aside and asking if I'd thought about real estate school. "You know," he said, "a backup plan, just in case the tech thing doesn't pan out." I remember laughing bitterly, not even bothering to explain that I was leading a product team at that point. So yeah, I had a few memories to burn through. That Sunday, I arrived early. I pulled up quietly to Uncle Tony's circular driveway in my new car, a Lamborghini Huracan Technica, matte black, the kind that growls even when idling. I'd only picked it up the day before, a splurge I agonized over for weeks. But when I sat in it, keys in hand, I realized I wasn't buying it for speed. I was buying it for me. For every time I'd been laughed at, dismissed, or belittled. As I stepped out, the afternoon sun hitting the sleek curves of the car, I saw them all gathered near the backyard patio. Tony's voice carried first. "Alyssa, come here and see this indoor sauna I just finished, steam from Finland." Then Mom's shrill laughter, followed by the unmistakable sound of clinking mimosas. I walked through the side gate, key fob still in hand, and saw them all turn toward me. Tony, holding a tumbler of scotch, raised an eyebrow. "Still living in that tiny apartment, Alex?" he called out with a chuckle. Alyssa, lounging in some designer floral dress, crossed her legs dramatically and sneered, "Must be tough." I smiled just a little. I didn't say anything. Then Mom, mid-sip, squinted. Her eyes dropped to my hand. "Wait," she said slowly, the color in her face draining. Is that a Lamborghini fob? I held it up slightly, as if I'd forgotten I was even holding it. Oh, this, I said, tilting my head. Just a little housewarming gift to myself. You could have heard a fork drop. Their reactions were priceless. I didn't rub it in, at least not yet. But the look in their eyes shifted, just for a second. From amusement, to confusion, to something else. Maybe doubt. Maybe fear. It was the first time in my life I felt like I had the upper hand. And I wasn't done yet. Because what they didn't know, what none of them had any idea about, was that the car was just the beginning. I had other plans. Quiet ones. Smart ones. And they were about to learn that the person they spent years mocking was someone they should have never underestimated. But for now, I just smiled and walked toward the patio, key still in hand, while the silence stretched like a rubber band, waiting to snap. And oh, it would. Just not yet. The silence only lasted a second, just long enough for the embarrassment to settle in, but they recovered fast. My family had always been experts at twisting the narrative in real time, like reality was just a dress they could tailor to fit whatever made them feel superior. Uncle Tony clapped his hands once, sharply, like he was shaking off the moment. Well, he said, voice louder than necessary. Look at you, big shot. Midlife crisis already? Thought that came at 40, not 28. Alyssa snorted. That's not a housewarming gift, that's a cry for help, she said, sipping her mimosa. Bet your rent's going to triple now that the neighbors think you're some kind of influencer. I didn't bite. I just smiled and took the empty seat at the far end of the table. I wasn't about to let them drag me down to the old dynamics. Not this time. But they kept going. Mom leaned in from the other side of the table, her voice doing that thing where it sounded sweet but had claws underneath. Honey, she said, that car must have cost, well, I don't want to know. But don't you think it's a little much? Especially when you're still living in that old apartment with the cracked windows. Dad, sitting beside her, nodded with a grunt. Should have put that money into property. Something stable. A house, maybe. You remember that duplex Alyssa showed us? That was a smart deal. I bit the inside of my cheek. I remembered that duplex. I also remembered how I'd offered to help Alyssa understand her taxes last year, and she'd told me to leave the money stuff to the adults. Alyssa turned toward me. Actually, I've been meaning to ask, do you have any connections at your company? I know someone who's looking for a job in tech. Totally brilliant, really hard worker. She's got, like, a lifestyle brand on Instagram. Could use something stable while she's working on growing it. I blinked. You mean you? She shrugged, all innocent. Who else? I looked at her for a beat. She hadn't worked a full-time job in over 3 years. Her last business venture was a pyramid scheme in all but name, and the one before that was selling essential oils infused with moonlight. I remembered because she tried to get Mom to invest $5,000 in it. She did. Before I could answer, Uncle Tony laughed again. I mean, hey, if he can afford a lumbo, maybe he is in charge of hiring. Right? Alyssa said quickly. It's only fair. Family helps family. That part hit me sideways. Family helps family. Where was that phrase when I worked 60-hour weeks and couldn't afford groceries? When I had to skip Christmas 3 years ago because my rent was due and Mom told me priorities, sweetheart? Where was it when they threw a graduation party for Alyssa and never even showed up for mine? Sure, I said calmly. Send over her resume. Alyssa brightened instantly, already flipping open her phone. Great. It's more like a portfolio, but, of course, I added, I'll have to send it through the proper review channels. There's a pretty strict process for interns. And there's no guarantee. Her face froze. Interns? Yeah, I said, sipping my water. We don't really hire junior roles without experience. A beat passed. Tony chuckled, clearly sensing the tension. Well, sounds like someone's feeling himself today. I ignored him. Instead, I turned to Mom. So how's the new remodel going? She looked surprised by the question, then softened. It's been good, actually. Expensive, but worth it. Of course, we had to dip into your father's pension just a bit. Things are tight these days. Dad muttered something about inflation. I nodded. That's rough. She glanced sideways. Which reminds me, your brother said you've been doing well lately. He mentioned something about stocks? Maybe you could, take a look at our portfolio sometime, just to see if we're positioned correctly. I swallowed the laugh rising in my throat. Not even subtle. She didn't ask how I was doing or what I'd been up to, just pivoted right into what I could do for them. Maybe, I said, when I have time. She smiled politely, but I saw the flicker of irritation in her eyes, like a child told, maybe later, when asking for candy. As brunch continued, the tension shifted. They tried to steer the conversation back towards safe ground. Alyssa's new lifestyle rebrand, Tony's plans to invest in some undervalued commercial property. But every so often, someone's gaze would drift toward the driveway, where the Lamborghini sat gleaming in the sun like a black diamond. It was like a ghost haunting them. At one point, Alyssa got up to refill her drink and muttered under her breath as she passed me, "It's just a car, Alex. Doesn't make you better than us." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. But then came the moment that really set everything in motion. After the meal, we were all lingering around the patio. Uncle Tony was showing off his new fire pit, complete with some voice-controlled lighting system that barely worked. That's when he dropped it. One of those casual bombs meant to sound offhand, but aimed like a knife. "So," he said, clapping me on the back, "now that you're rolling in cash, you finally gonna grow up and move out of that shoebox? Get a place with a real kitchen, maybe? Heck, buy a place like this, if you're serious." Everyone laughed, even Mom. I shrugged. Already bought a place. That shut them up. "You what?" Dad said. I turned and took another sip of my water, letting the silence breathe. "Closed last week," I said, not bothering to hide the grin this time. "Downtown. Penthouse. It's got a rooftop terrace and a private elevator." Alyssa blinked. "You're kidding." "Nope." "Wait," Mom said slowly. How much was it?" "Little under $6 million. Dead silence. Tony recovered first. "Wow. Big spender. Hope you don't blow it all in one place." "Already diversified," I said. This was just the part one felt like living in. I could feel it, the shift. The tone had changed. They weren't mocking me anymore. They were calculating, trying to figure out how to reframe things, how to place themselves closer to the new power center without looking desperate. And I saw it in Mom's eyes first. That flicker of something greedy. Entitled. Like the wheels had started turning. That was the moment I knew. They didn't just want validation anymore. They wanted access. And they were going to start asking for it, one favor at a time. What they didn't know, what they never expected, was that I already knew exactly how this game worked. And I had no intention of letting them win. Not this time. But that part comes later. For now, I just stood there in the patio's filtered light, letting them process everything they thought they knew about me unraveling in real time. Because the real story was only just beginning. The brunch ended awkwardly, with stiff hugs and overly sweet goodbyes. Alyssa tried to mask her bitterness by complimenting my shirt. "Is that Zara or, like, some minimalist thing?" And Mom gave me that long, lingering look she always did when she was about to ask for something. But for once, I didn't offer anything. I just nodded, thanked them for the meal, and walked back to my car without a backward glance. The next few weeks were quiet. Suspiciously quiet. No texts from Alyssa with passive-aggressive links to job listings. No voicemails from Dad asking if I'd considered investing in modular prefab homes yet. Even Mom, who usually sent me a dozen emojis a week and random forwarded articles about smart habits of successful men, had gone silent. At first, I thought maybe they were giving me space. Maybe, finally, some respect had settled in. Maybe the Lamborghini, the penthouse, the quiet success had bought me something I'd never had in that family: dignity. I should have known better. It started with a phone call. I was at the new place, standing barefoot on the rooftop terrace, sipping coffee and watching the skyline turn orange as the sun dipped behind the buildings. My phone buzzed. "Mom." I hesitated, then answered. "Hey." "Hi, sweetheart," she said too brightly. "How's the new home? I keep picturing you up there like Bruce Wayne, all handsome and mysterious." I chuckled. "It's great." Still settling in. A beat of silence, then, "Listen, your Uncle Tony mentioned something about a housewarming?" I paused. I hadn't planned one yet. "Oh." Her voice dropped, just slightly. "Well, we'd love to see the place. It's been so long since we've done anything as a family. I think it'd be really good for Alyssa. You know she's been going through a rough patch." I didn't ask what kind of rough patch. I didn't need to. Alyssa's rough patches were code for running out of credit. "I'll think about it," I said, keeping my tone neutral. She didn't like that, but she didn't push. Not then. 2 days later, I came home to find a delivery van parked outside my building. Workers were hauling what looked like catering trays, crates of champagne, floral arrangements, even folding chairs. I blinked in confusion and went straight up to the lobby. There, standing with our concierge and flashing her too bright smile, was Alyssa. "Alex," she chirped like we were old friends. Perfect timing. I was just making sure everything's in place for Saturday. My stomach dropped. "For what?" She blinked innocently. "The housewarming. Didn't Mom tell you? We've got the guest list down to 64. Nothing crazy, just family, friends, a few influencers. Oh, and there's a violinist." I stared at her. "You planned a party at my home?" "Well, our home, for the day." She waved a manicured hand. "We wanted to surprise you. I never agreed to this." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You've got the space. You're not using it for anything anyway. Don't be selfish." I felt something twist in my chest. "Who gave you permission to even enter my building?" "Mom did." She smiled sweetly. "She said you'd be too humble to plan something like this for yourself, so she helped me coordinate. She said to use the building's event request form." I turned to the concierge. "Did someone submit a form under my name?" He looked uncomfortable. Yes, sir. It was emailed with your signature. I assumed it was approved." I narrowed my eyes. "Can you show me?" He hesitated, then pulled it up on the screen. There it was, my name, my address, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. It was forged. The email was from a Gmail address I hadn't used in years. A throwaway account I'd signed up for in college, long before I got serious about privacy and security. And then I realized, Mom had access to that account. Years ago, when I was between jobs and she helped me apply for things, she insisted on keeping the login. I'd forgotten all about it. I turned back to Alyssa. "You forged my approval. You're hosting a party I didn't agree to. At my home. With over 60 people I don't know." "Oh my God," she said, laughing. "Stop being dramatic. It's just one day. You're not even using the space. Get out." Her smile faltered. "Excuse me. Get out of my building. Right now." "Alex, I'm not asking twice." Her jaw clenched. She glanced at the concierge, then back at me. "Fine," she spat. "But you're seriously going to regret being this petty. Mom said you'd act like this." That night, I canceled every vendor. Blocked the access passes. Sent a note to building security to deny entry to my family for the foreseeable future. I was angry, but more than that, I was hurt. They didn't ask. They never asked. They just took, like they always had. And this time, they'd crossed a line. The betrayal stung deeper than I expected. It wasn't just the forged form or the party I never approved. It was the realization that even now, after everything, I was still just a resource to them. A wallet. A venue. A status symbol. Not a person. A week passed. No one called. No one apologized. Then came the second punch. I got an alert from my bank about a flagged transaction, $9,700, pending wire transfer to a private account. The name? Alyssa Rivera. I nearly dropped my phone. It had been initiated through my business account, one that no one in my family knew existed. One I had protected with two-factor authentication and internal access only. Or so I thought. I spent the next hour on the phone with the bank, locking everything down, running security checks, tracing access logs. The breach came through a shared Wi-Fi network. From my mother's house. The last time I'd visited, I'd logged into my business email briefly to forward myself a contract. Apparently, someone, Alyssa, almost certainly, had copied my credentials from the router cache using some shady app. I stared at the flagged transaction for a long time. It wasn't just a betrayal now. It was theft. Calculated. Cold. Entitled. And I knew, without a doubt, that they weren't going to stop until I made them. That was the moment everything inside me shifted. The anger didn't just boil, it hardened into resolve. They wanted to play games? Fine. I knew how to play too. But this time, I wouldn't just protect what was mine. This time, I was going to make sure they could never do it to anyone else again. I didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. I sat in my living room with the lights off, watching the glow of the skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, my mind spinning in 1,000 directions. I had the money, the title, the view, but none of it could drown out the familiar ache pressing against my chest. That knot of betrayal, that weight of knowing, deep in your gut, that the people who raised you never really saw you. They saw what you could give them. And now that I had something worth taking, they'd sunk their claws in again, only deeper this time. I kept replaying it all, the forged signature, the unauthorized party, the attempted wire transfer. Alyssa laughing it off, calling me selfish. Mom saying I'd overreacted, when I finally called her. That call had been short. "Did you really think forging my approval for a party in my home was okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Mom had sighed like I was inconveniencing her. "You're so sensitive, Alex. It was meant to celebrate you. You've done well. We just wanted to share that with everyone." "And the bank transfer? Was that celebrating me too?" Silence. I waited. She finally said, "She needed help, Alex. You have so much. Your sister's just trying to get back on her feet." I didn't even know she had my banking info. "You logged in from our house. Don't blame us if you left doors open." She said that like it was my fault. Like I had invited them in to take what they wanted. Like I owed them for existing. "I'm done," I said. "With all of you." "Oh, don't be dramatic. Families fight." "No, families don't steal from each other. You're going to regret cutting off your own blood," she snapped. "You'll end up alone." Then she hung up, and I sat there, alone in a $6 million penthouse, with a Lamborghini downstairs and a closet full of tailored clothes I barely wore, feeling like I was right back in that shoebox apartment, just older, lonelier, and now with a better view. I didn't go into the office for a few days. I told the team I was sick. I turned off Slack, ignored emails. The startup was stable now, post-acquisition, and I'd built a team that didn't need me every hour, but I still felt guilty. Like I was letting something crumble, again. But I didn't have the energy to fix anything. I barely had the energy to get out of bed. My apartment, once a symbol of how far I'd come, started to feel like a gilded prison. Every echoing step reminded me that I had no one to share it with. No partner. No close friends nearby. I'd pushed so hard, for so long, to prove myself that I hadn't built much of a life outside of my work. I ordered food, but barely touched it. Let dishes pile up. My houseplants withered. I didn't answer when the doorman buzzed. I ghosted my team lead when she asked if I needed support. One night, I sat at my desk staring at the wire transfer screen. $9,700. It wasn't even about the money. It was about the audacity. The certainty with which Alyssa believed she could reach into my life and take what she wanted, like it was hers by birthright. And Mom defending it, justifying it. That hit harder than I admitted. I kept flashing back to when I was 14, and Alyssa had taken my college savings bond, something our grandfather left only for me, and used it to buy herself a trip to Europe. Mom had covered for her then, too. She needed it more, she'd said. "You'll find another way." And I had. Every time they took something, I rebuilt. But I was so tired of rebuilding in silence. So I started making lists. Not vengeful plans. Not yet. Just facts. Accounts I needed to audit. Access points to lock down. Legal options, should I need them. Security upgrades for everything. Two-factor authentication, private server encryptions, biometric locks. I moved funds into cold storage. Flagged accounts with suspicious login attempts. Contacted a digital security consultant and hired him for a full privacy sweep. Then I went a step further. I changed my will. I wrote it out carefully, detailing every contingency, down to the cent. If anything ever happened to me, not a single member of my family would see a dime. Not Mom. Not Dad. Especially not Alyssa. Instead, it would go to a scholarship fund. One for kids like me, quiet, overlooked, the ones everyone dismissed because they didn't shine in the way their families wanted. I even named the fund after my grandfather, the one who tried to give me a start before it was stolen. Then I called a lawyer. A very good one. I told him everything. Not just the wire attempt, but the long history of financial gaslighting, the emotional manipulation, the forged email. He didn't say much, just nodded and started drafting papers. I didn't know what the end game was yet, but I knew I had to walk away. Not just emotionally, but completely. Financially, legally, digitally. Clean break. I canceled the joint phone line I'd still been paying for in my parents' name. Cut off the automatic transfer that had been funding their emergency savings for the last 5 years. Pulled out of the investment fund I'd let Dad manage for a family legacy. I let the broker know I was taking full control of the assets. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about finally choosing me. But even as I started to cut cords, part of me wondered if I was doing the right thing. Was I becoming cold? Heartless? Would I wake up one day and regret it, just like Mom said? Then, a few days later, I got an alert. A private Facebook group. Rivera Family Reunion. Hosted by Alyssa and friends. I clicked out of curiosity. The banner was a photo of my car, taken without my knowledge, parked in front of my building. The caption? Celebrating the success of our amazing little brother, Can't wait to toast him with friends and family next month. RSVP soon. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Not only were they still planning to use me, they were broadcasting it, claiming me. Even now, after everything, they were still framing it like they owned my story. Like my success was just another party prop they could wave around to boost their own image. And suddenly, the question wasn't if I was going to walk away completely. It was how far I was willing to go to make sure they never had a chance to do this to me or anyone else ever again. That Facebook post changed everything. I sat at my desk staring at the screen, every word sinking into my chest like a stone, celebrating our amazing little brother. The hypocrisy would have been laughable if it hadn't felt so personal. There it was, the final confirmation that to them, I wasn't a person. I was a narrative, a success story they wanted to wrap themselves around like a designer scarf, something they could wear at parties and smile about, as if they'd built me. I closed the laptop without reacting. Didn't call, didn't comment, didn't even block them. They wanted to spin a story? Fine. I'd write the ending myself. But this time, they wouldn't be in it. That week, something inside me shifted. The pain, the hollow ache of betrayal, was still there, but it hardened into something sharper, more focused. I began waking up earlier. I worked out again, cleaned the apartment, filled the fridge. I reached out to my team, and to my surprise, they welcomed me back with open arms. Apparently, I'd earned more goodwill than I realized. When I showed up for our Monday meeting, the entire dev squad clapped. I laughed, genuinely for the first time in weeks, and took my usual spot near the whiteboard. The startup that had once been a long shot was now growing rapidly. After the acquisition, the parent company offered me a key leadership role, not in title, in equity. They wanted to spin out a sister company, a hybrid AI platform for high-level logistics. And they wanted me to lead it. Fully funded, minimal oversight, full control. I took the deal. Quietly. Strategically. I didn't make an announcement, didn't post about it online. But I hired a team of brilliant engineers, found a sleek private office space downtown, and got to work. This time, I wasn't building out of fear. I wasn't hustling just to prove I deserved a seat at the table. I was the table now, and it felt different, cleaner, calmer. I set new boundaries, too. Fired my old accountant. He'd been referred by Dad years ago, and hired a rock-solid financial advisor who'd built portfolios for C-level execs. I moved all my assets into secure trusts, closed all shared accounts, and created a new holding company to manage my investments, completely under my name. And I started saying no. No to my parents' urgent requests for financial help when their roof leaked. No to Alyssa when she sent a breezy text about wanting to catch up over lunch, which somehow included the address of a $200 a plate sushi bar. No to Uncle Tony when he emailed about a hot investment opportunity in Belize. Just no. And I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I just went silent. Their confusion was immediate. Then came the guilt trips, the passive-aggressive group texts, the long voicemails from Mom asking if I was okay and wondering why I'd changed. I had changed. I wasn't that quiet, desperate to please kid anymore. I wasn't someone they could mold into a family ATM. I was mine. That summer, I bought a small cabin 3 hours outside the city. Not flashy, not expensive, just quiet, surrounded by trees and stars. I kept it to myself. No one in my family even knew it existed. I'd go there on weekends, bring a book, cook simple meals, and listen to music. I hadn't realized how much noise I'd grown used to. The expectations, the judgment, the constant tug of wanting approval. Out there, it was just me. Me and peace. Back in the city, I started mentoring younger engineers. A few had stories like mine. Brilliant minds who'd grown up overlooked, underappreciated, dismissed because they weren't loud or charismatic. I helped one guy polish his resume and get into Google. I connected another with a seed fund I'd invested in and watched her raise $300,000 in less than a week. Their wins felt more real than any car, any suit, any number in my account. Meanwhile, my new company was gaining traction fast. By fall, we'd landed 3 major enterprise clients and a $1.5 million pre-order for the beta. Investors came calling. The parent company upped my equity stake. My name started floating around in quiet VC circles. Still, I stayed off social media. I didn't want the spotlight. I didn't need it. But others noticed anyway. One afternoon in September, I walked into a private conference for startup founders and immediately felt a dozen eyes on me. A woman from a major tech journal introduced herself and asked if I'd be open to a profile. I hesitated but eventually said yes, on one condition. She couldn't publish anything about my family. She asked why. Because they're not part of the story, I said. And it was true. They'd always treated my ambition like an inconvenience, until it started printing money. Then suddenly, I was theirs. Their prodigy. Their pride. But they never helped build any of it. They didn't support me when I was working 2 jobs and eating instant noodles. They didn't show up for my graduation. They weren't there when I needed advice or encouragement. They only showed up when they saw dollar signs. So now, they were out. And without my support, they were struggling. I heard from an old high school friend that Alyssa had posted a GoFundMe for a business recovery fund. Something about a broken camera and unjustified platform censorship. The only donation was from Mom. Dad called twice, both missed calls. No voicemails. I ignored them. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. But it was power. And for the first time in my life, I had it. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't flailing. I wasn't hustling for anyone else's approval. I was building. On my terms. And I knew, sooner or later, they'd try to come back. They'd find some new excuse. A new crisis. A new manipulation. But next time, I'd be ready. Because I had something they never did. Not just money. Not just success. But clarity. And a plan. It happened on a random Thursday afternoon. Nothing dramatic. Nothing cinematic. Just a soft ping on my work phone while I was reviewing our third-quarter roadmap with the product team. Subject: Notice of Inquiry, Rivera Holdings, LLC. I nearly dismissed it. My name wasn't Rivera Holdings. But the sender, someone from a mid-tier legal firm in Jersey, had attached documents. And there, plain as day, was my name. Apparently, my parents had formed an LLC a few months ago. And somehow, I was listed as a co-founding contributor. The documents claimed I had transferred assets to the LLC and orally committed future financial backing to ensure its operations. That wording sent a chill through my chest. It was vague, legally clumsy, and just plausible enough to cause problems if I didn't shut it down fast. I immediately looped in my lawyer. He read through the documents, then muttered, "They're phishing. This isn't a real claim. It's a setup." "For what?" I asked. "To pressure you. Or to make you look like you're part of something you never agreed to." My guess? They're leveraging your name for legitimacy. He was right. I did some quiet digging, and what I found made my stomach turn. Rivera Holdings LLC had launched a luxury lifestyle brand, complete with a cheap Shopify site, Instagram ads featuring my parents' backyard dressed up to look like a spa, and an About Us page claiming the business was built from generational wisdom and cutting-edge tech, courtesy of their son's industry experience. My face wasn't on the page, but my story was. Almost word for word, stolen from the private podcast interview I'd done a few months earlier, the one I'd asked not to be made public. The worst part? They had already received small business funding from a lender that trusted their story because of me. My blood boiled. They were using me again. Not just socially, not just to impress relatives or flaunt at brunch, but financially, legally, fraudulently. And I realized something in that moment. They were never going to stop. Not unless I made them. But I wasn't going to confront them. No angry phone calls. No shouting matches. No text messages begging them to explain. This time, I would take a different path. One they wouldn't see coming. One they couldn't wiggle out of. I met with my lawyer again, and we began quietly building a case. Not for court. For control. The kind of control that would give me the leverage to make this end on my terms. It started with documentation. I compiled years' worth of emails, texts, voice messages, anything that demonstrated how my family had benefited from my finances without contracts or consent. We found the forged event form from the housewarming. We gathered bank records showing unauthorized transfers. I pulled the archived Facebook group post where they used my likeness to promote this celebration that never happened. And, of course, I screen captured the entire Rivera Holdings site. My lawyer contacted the small business lender they had tricked. We presented enough evidence to trigger an internal fraud audit. Their loan was flagged. Frozen. Then I took things a step further. I hired a private investigator. Not for dirt, nothing shady. Just facts. Because I had a hunch. This wasn't the first time they'd played this game. And I was right. In the last 5 years, my parents had funneled money through no fewer than 4 shell companies. None of them lasted more than 18 months. They had used different names, different friends as silent co-signers, even an old landlord as a stand-in manager. And each time the company tanked, they'd moved on like nothing happened. The worst? One of the companies had scammed a family friend out of $50,000, someone who believed my father when he said it was a guaranteed short-term investment backed by my tech success. That family friend, Mr. Patel, my high school chemistry teacher, the same man who once gave me a ride home every day for a year when my parents forgot to pick me up. I called him. He answered on the second ring. His voice cracked when he heard my name. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't know what they did, but I'm going to make it right." "You don't have to. I want to." I wired him the $50,000 the next day. No fanfare, no public show, just a promise, quietly kept. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the shift. I wasn't just healing myself anymore. I was undoing their damage, cleaning up their mess. And with every step, I got stronger. I partnered with a legal team that specialized in white-collar fraud. We drafted cease and desist letters, filed formal complaints to the Federal Trade Commission and Better Business Bureau, and prepared civil claims for identity misuse and fraud, just in case. I still wasn't sure I'd go that far, but I wanted the gun loaded in case I needed to pull the trigger. Then I moved on to the quiet part of the plan. Reputation. I contacted a branding firm. Not for clout, for protection. They helped me build a verified public-facing profile. Not a flashy one, just enough digital presence to separate my identity from anything my family tried to link me to. We optimized SEO, established a simple personal site, secured trademark protections on my name in association with my businesses, and created a paper trail of public disassociation from Rivera Holdings and anything affiliated. Then, I bought the domain riverholdings.org, redirected it to a static page that read, "This company is not affiliated with Alex Rivera or any of his business ventures. All unauthorized use of his name and likeness is being handled through legal channels." I didn't tell them I was doing any of this. I didn't need to, because by the time they found out, it would be too late. Then came the final piece. One of the founders I mentored, Sarah, had started a nonprofit that offered mentorship and startup grants to underrepresented youth in tech. She was growing fast, but struggling with consistent funding. I reached out to her one night and offered to become her first anchor investor. "Are you sure?" she asked, stunned. I don't even know how to thank you." "Don't," I said. "Just do the work. Build something that lasts." I donated anonymously, but I stayed involved quietly. She didn't know it, but I was working on setting up a permanent trust that would funnel 10% of my annual profits directly to her nonprofit for the next decade. It was my answer to the question that had haunted me since the betrayal. What do I do with all of this? The answer? I give it to people who deserve it, not people who demand it. That fall, I received a final email from Mom. Subject line, "We need to talk, please." The message was short. "I know you're angry, but this isn't how families treat each other. I'm sorry if you feel we crossed a line. We just wanted to be part of your success. Please don't do anything that would hurt your sister or the business. You've come so far. Let's not burn bridges." There it was. Still the same spin. "If you feel we crossed a line." Now we crossed it. Still protecting Alyssa. Still defending a business built on lies. Still trying to guilt me into silence. But now, I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was ready. The next chapter was coming. And this time, they wouldn't be the ones writing it. It was December when the house of cards finally started to fall. Not with a bang, but with a knock. Alyssa opened the door to her rented townhouse in the suburbs and found a man in a gray suit holding a small envelope. He handed it over with a polite nod. "Ms. Rivera, you've been served." It wasn't a lawsuit. Not yet. It was a formal notice of disassociation, a legally binding declaration stating that I, Alex Rivera, had never been involved in Rivera Holdings LLC, nor had I authorized the use of my name, likeness, or reputation in connection with any of their activities. It outlined in detail every instance of unauthorized use I had documented, and it gave them 14 days to remove every reference, retract every statement, and dissolve any promotional materials containing my name. If they failed, then the real consequences would follow. I made sure copies were sent to Mom, Dad, their accountant, who, it turned out, had no idea he was part of a scam, and this part was delicious, their loan officer at the small business bank that had approved their funding. The first domino fell 3 days later. The lender revoked the $45,000 loan and began an internal fraud investigation. Their accounts were frozen. Their Shopify storefront was removed for identity abuse. Instagram flagged their brand as under review, and within 48 hours, their entire social media presence vanished. But the real moment I'd been waiting for came from a familiar voice. Mr. Patel. He filed a small claims lawsuit against Rivera Holdings for the full amount he was misled into investing, $50,000. I had told him I'd stay out of it, but his son was a lawyer, and apparently, he wanted to make a point. The lawsuit was small, but it opened the door. Because once it became public record, others started stepping forward. One by one, former friends, co-workers, neighbors, all people my parents or Alyssa had quietly borrowed from, pitched to, or taken advantage of, started sharing stories. One woman claimed my mom had promised to include her as a co-founder in a beauty line that never existed. Another man said Alyssa convinced him to sponsor her wellness retreat in exchange for brand placement, only for the retreat to get canceled and his money to disappear. It wasn't just a few lies. It was a pattern. And now, that pattern had receipts. I had quietly worked with my legal team to compile a full report, a timeline, complete with evidence, screenshots, and transaction records of everything my family had done over the last 10 years in my name or connected to my success. We titled it, The Legacy They Tried to Steal. I never released it publicly. I didn't need to, but I did send a copy, anonymously, to every vendor, bank, and potential partner they'd listed as references on Rivera Holdings. The calls stopped, the doors closed, and the whispers started. Even Uncle Tony, who once boasted about flipping condos and leveraging connections, sent me a shaky LinkedIn message asking if I wanted to grab lunch and talk things out. I didn't respond. But the final straw, the moment I knew the revenge had landed exactly where it needed to, came at 6:41 a.m. on Christmas Eve. I was at the cabin, fireplace crackling, coffee in hand, when my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. But curiosity got the better of me, and I played it. Her voice was brittle. Cold. Alex, I hope you're proud of yourself. Your sisters had to move out. The business is gone. We're being audited. Everything we built is unraveling because you had to punish us. Over what? A misunderstanding? A party? You could have handled this quietly, like family, but you chose this. There was a pause. I hope someday you understand the damage you've done. We're your blood. I played the message twice. Not because I was shaken, but because it confirmed everything I'd ever known about them. They hadn't learned anything. They still believed they were the victims. Even now, after they stole, lied, manipulated, they thought I was the one who owed them. And that's why I never regretted any of it. Because this wasn't revenge born from hate. It was justice born from truth. I didn't destroy them. They did that on their own. All I did was remove the safety net they'd used to bounce back every time. The one I used to be. Now, they'd fall like everyone else. And me? I finally stood tall. Not in spite of them, but without them. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was slow, humiliating, and public in the ways that mattered most to them. The LLC dissolved within weeks. The fraud investigation led to a full IRS audit. Turns out, my parents had been mixing personal and business funds for years, writing off extravagant purchases, spa weekends, luxury handbags, first-class flights, as consulting expenses. The back taxes alone were enough to cripple them. Their accountant, terrified of liability, cut ties immediately and reported potential misconduct to the state board. Their credit tanks followed. Alyssa moved back in with them. Her influencer life quietly died. No more beach selfies, no more curated brunches. Her sponsorships pulled out when word spread that she'd used a fake endorsement from me in her brand pitch deck. The laptop she once used to edit motivational content was sold on Facebook Marketplace for $200. I never spoke to any of them again. They sent messages for months, ranging from furious and accusatory to pathetically apologetic. I read none of them. I had my assistant filter every call, every email, every attempt. Eventually, even those stopped. The rest of the world moved on. And so did I. The new company grew beyond anything I imagined. In the spring, we secured a partnership with a global logistics firm. Our valuation tripled. Investors called me a visionary, a quiet force in the tech space. I just smiled and kept working. The scholarship fund I started in my grandfather's name launched its first cohort. I flew out to meet the students personally, young kids with fire in their eyes, most of whom had no idea what they were capable of yet. I saw myself in them. And for once, I felt like the success I'd built meant something more than just escaping my past. I never posted about my wins, never clapped back online, never exposed them publicly, because I didn't need to. Their downfall spoke louder than any tweet ever could. Years later, a journalist reached out about doing a feature on self-made founders who rose from difficult families. I declined, but I gave her one quote. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's living so far above their world, they can't even reach your shadow. And I meant it. That December, I spent Christmas alone in my mountain cabin. No drama, no guilt, just snow, silence, and a roaring fire. I poured a glass of wine, raised it to the night, and whispered, "To peace." Then I let the past burn behind me. You know that feeling when you're technically part of a family, but you always feel like the extra piece in a puzzle? The one that doesn't quite fit no matter how much you try to jam it in? Yeah, that's been my life in a nutshell. My name's Caleb, and I turned 19 last month. But this story isn't about turning 19, it's about my 18th birthday. Or, more specifically, the birthday party that was supposed to be mine, until my older brother decided it was his again. And my parents? They let him take it. Let me rewind a bit. I grew up in a pretty normal suburban neighborhood. Think barbecue Sundays, lawn mowing Saturdays, and nosy neighbors who knew everything before you did. On the outside, my family looked picture perfect. My dad owns a small construction company. Nothing flashy, but enough to keep us comfortable. My mom's a high school guidance counselor, always preaching about empathy and listening, though ironically never really did much of either at home. And then there's my brother, Jeremy, 2 years older than me, star of the soccer team, golden boy of the family, and somehow the main character in every story even when it wasn't his. From the time we were kids, Jeremy got everything first, and then some. First bike, first phone, first car. That part's understandable, I guess. But what stung was how even when it was finally supposed to be my turn, he'd somehow swoop in and take center stage again. And my parents would just let it happen. No, worse, they'd cheer him on. I didn't used to mind it. I mean, I was the quiet kid. Kept to myself, got decent grades, never really caused trouble. I figured maybe if I stayed out of the way and did my own thing, they'd notice me in their own time. They didn't. At least, not in any way that mattered. Jeremy got celebrated for bringing home a C in algebra because he worked so hard. I got a full-ride scholarship to a state university and got a polite, "That's nice, honey," before the topic changed to Jeremy's job hunt. He wasn't even looking. Still, I never really confronted them about it. I told myself it wasn't worth the drama. I bottled it up, smiled through it, played the role of the good, understanding son. But sometimes, it's not just one moment that breaks you. It's the slow accumulation of little cuts. And my 18th birthday? That was the final slice that finally made everything bleed. It started innocently enough. A couple months before my birthday, Mom asked if I had any ideas for how I wanted to celebrate. Nothing fancy, I said. Maybe a backyard party, a few friends, some music, a bonfire. Something chill. She actually seemed excited about it. Said it was a big milestone, that she wanted to make it special. I remember that phrase exactly, because she said it like it meant something. I started helping her plan it. We made lists, who I'd invite, what kind of food to order, even talked about setting up those string lights we only brought out for 4th of July. It felt nice. Like, for once, something was about me. I wasn't asking for a parade or anything. I just wanted to feel like I mattered. And then Jeremy came home for spring break. He was supposed to be away at college, but he dropped out a semester in, said it wasn't for him. My parents barely blinked. Said they were proud of him for figuring out what he didn't want. Like that was some kind of accomplishment. Meanwhile, I was filling out scholarship essays in the same room and got a passive-aggressive comment about making sure I wasn't putting too much pressure on myself. Anyway, Jeremy came back, and immediately the entire house revolved around him again. He flopped on the couch like he never left, raided the fridge, left towels on the bathroom floor, and suddenly it was like I didn't exist. My dad was back to telling old Jeremy stories at dinner, like the time he scored a winning goal in 9th grade. Mom made his favorite meals 3 nights in a row. I joked one evening that maybe I should drop out too just to get that kind of royal treatment. She laughed like I was being sarcastic. I wasn't. About a week before my birthday, everything shifted. I came home from school one day and found Jeremy and my mom in the kitchen, giggling over old photo albums. He looked up at me and said, "Hey, remember my 18th party? Man, that was wild." I did remember it. It was wild. They rented out a small venue, invited his entire friend group, even had a DJ. My party budget was maybe a tenth of that. But again, I didn't say anything. Then Jeremy casually dropped the bomb. "You know what'd be fun?" he said. "If we did it again. Like a redo." 18 was such a blur, I barely remember it. Let's throw a party, but chill this time. Backyard, music, bonfire. I kinda wanna relive it, but like, slower. I froze. My mom smiled at him like he just solved world hunger. "That actually sounds like a great idea." I blinked. "Wait, what?" She looked at me, almost like she forgot I was in the room. "Oh, sweetie, don't worry. We can still combine the parties. It'll be fun. You two can celebrate together." "I'm not turning 18 again," I said slowly. "I'm just turning 18. Jeremy shrugged. "Yeah, but we're both at big milestones, right? Yours is coming up, mine's like memory lane. I mean, it's not a big deal. Chill party, both of us, what's the harm?" I looked at my mom, waiting for her to say something. Anything. Set a boundary. Remind him that this was my day. Instead, she nodded thoughtfully. "You could even share the guest list. That way everyone gets along, and it's more of a family event." I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. That special party I'd been planning? Gone. Hijacked. Absorbed into Jeremy's nostalgia tour. Over the next few days, it only got worse. Decorations I helped pick out were replaced with ones Jeremy liked better. My friend group was trimmed down because we can't invite too many people. "Sweetie, it's still our backyard." A cake I wanted got vetoed for a flavor Jeremy preferred. He even asked if I'd mind playing some of his old playlists, for the vibe. I started feeling like a guest at my own celebration, like a background actor in someone else's movie. My dad was no help either. When I told him I felt like I was being pushed aside, he said, "It's just one day, Caleb. Don't make it a big thing. Let your brother enjoy himself too." As if I hadn't already been sidelined for the last 18 years. The day of the party arrived. And let me tell you, it wasn't mine. From the second people showed up, they greeted Jeremy first. "Oh man, Jeremy. Back from college. Didn't you turn 18 already? This your party?" And he'd laugh, slap their backs, say, "Nah, we're celebrating both of us today." Except no one looked at me. No one said happy birthday, unless I reminded them. My name wasn't even on the cake. And that was just the beginning of the night. What happened next, what finally made me snap, was so ridiculous, so humiliating, I still get chills thinking about it. But I'll save that part for the next post. Let's just say I walked out of that party before the candles were lit. And I didn't come back. Not just to the party, but to them. The music was too loud. Not in a "this party's lit" kind of way, but in that overwhelming, pulsing in your sinuses kind of way that makes your thoughts stutter. I stood in the corner of my own backyard, holding a plastic cup of warm soda, pretending to be engaged in a conversation I wasn't even part of. My friends were scattered across the yard, mostly huddled together in one corner near the fence, probably because they felt just as out of place as I did. Jeremy's friends, on the other hand, had taken over everything. The fire pit, the food table, even the playlist. And every time I tried to inch back into the party I helped plan, it was like trying to squeeze through a door that had already been slammed shut. I remember glancing around and thinking, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I just need to relax and let it happen. It's just one night. That's what Dad said, right? But then I saw the banner. It was strung above the patio, hung with crooked thumbtacks like someone slapped it together at the last minute. Big bold letters read, "Jeremy's 18th, again. Bash," with a winking emoji on the side. That stupid little winking emoji like it was all one big joke. My jaw actually dropped. I hadn't even noticed it during setup, probably because it was one of those last-minute surprises they threw up while I was in the garage fetching more chairs. No mention of me. Not even a joint birthday or Caleb's big day. Just Jeremy. Again. I walked up to my mom, who was hovering by the grill giving instructions to my uncle like she was running a wedding. "Where's the banner we made?" I asked quietly. She blinked. "What banner?" "The one with both our names. The one we printed last week. I helped you design it." "Oh," she said, brushing imaginary lint off her blouse. "Well, Jeremy said it looked kind of cluttered, and we didn't want to confuse people, you know?" This one's more fun. I stared at her. So you just threw away the one we planned? She actually had the nerve to frown like I was the unreasonable one. Sweetheart, don't make this a big deal. Everyone knows it's your birthday too. No, they didn't. No one had said a word to me unless I said it first. Even Jeremy's friends kept giving me confused looks like I was the weird neighbor kid who accidentally wandered into the wrong party. I turned and walked back toward the fence where my friends were sitting. My best friend Kyle gave me a tight-lipped smile as I approached. You good, man? He asked. I forced a nod. Totally. Living the dream. We both knew I was lying, but he didn't press it. I appreciated that about him. We chatted a bit, trying to pretend like the night wasn't a complete disaster, when suddenly Jeremy's voice boomed from the other side of the yard. Yo, everybody quiet down for a sec. The music cut off, and the crowd hushed. He was standing on one of the patio chairs, drink in hand like he was about to deliver a State of the Union address. I just want to say thanks for coming out tonight, he grinned. This party means a lot to me. 18's a big deal. Yeah, I know I already hit it a couple years ago, but, it's symbolic, right? There were some cheers and laughter. My mom was clapping. My dad gave him a thumbs up. I just felt like I didn't get to really celebrate the first time, so I'm grateful my family helped me make tonight special. Thanks, Mom. Dad, you guys are the best. Everyone clapped. I waited for him to add. And happy birthday to Caleb too. Or, we're celebrating my brother tonight. Anything. But no. He stepped off the chair, music resumed, and the crowd swarmed him with back pats and drinks. I felt the heat rise up my neck like a sunburn. My ears started ringing, and I wasn't sure if it was from the speakers or the blood pressure spike. That was it. That was the moment. The moment it all clicked. They didn't forget me. They just didn't care. Kyle turned to me. Dude. What? I shook my head slowly. Nah, I'm done. He stood up, concerned. What do you mean? I mean I'm leaving. Caleb, I'm done pretending this is okay. I'm not staying here just to be invisible. Before he could stop me, I walked straight through the yard, past the crowd, past the lights and the fire pit and the stupid banner. My mom saw me and raised a hand, puzzled. Where are you going? She asked. Out, I said. But we haven't done cake yet. I stopped, turned to look at her. Did you even get a cake for me? She hesitated. We got Jeremy's favorite. But it's chocolate. Everyone likes chocolate. I didn't respond. I just walked out the gate. Behind me, I could hear murmurs. Someone asked, was that his brother? Another voice replied, didn't know he was part of the party. Exactly. Kyle followed me to the street. Want me to come with? I shook my head. Nah. Stay? You might actually enjoy it. He hesitated, then nodded. You sure? Yeah, I said, trying to breathe through the surge of emotions. I just need to not be here. I walked home in silence. It wasn't far, just 20 minutes on foot, but it felt longer. Every step was heavier than the last, like I was dragging years of disappointment behind me. I got to my house, unlocked the door, and went straight to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just sat. Because sometimes it's not anger that breaks you. It's the quiet realization that nothing's going to change unless you do something about it. I didn't go back to the party. I didn't answer their texts later that night. My phone buzzed twice, once from my mom, once from Jeremy. I didn't read them. The next morning, I woke up early. I took down every photo of Jeremy on my wall. Old family trips, birthdays, his graduation. I boxed them up and shoved them in the closet. Then I went to the kitchen, made myself breakfast, and left a note on the fridge that just said, don't worry. I didn't forget my birthday. They didn't say anything to me for 2 days. On the third day, Mom cornered me in the hallway. Are you going to keep acting like this? I stared at her. Like what? Like we did something to you. We just wanted Jeremy to have a nice night too. I didn't even know what to say to that. Too. As if I ever got a nice night of my own. I'm your son too, I finally said. Her face fell. You're being dramatic. I walked past her without another word. That week, I started making plans. Serious ones. College was coming up, and I already had that scholarship. I began looking into housing, even though my parents said I could live at home. I didn't want to. I didn't want to owe them a thing. When I finally moved out 3 months later, my dad helped load my boxes into the car. We barely spoke. Jeremy didn't even show up. Mom hugged me goodbye. Call us if you need anything, okay? I nodded, but I didn't mean it. College was freedom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I made new friends, found professors who actually saw potential in me, joined a film club. I even wrote a short story about a forgotten birthday. It won second place in a campus contest. I didn't talk to my family much. They didn't ask, and I didn't offer. And then, almost a year to the day after that party, I got a message. It was from Jeremy. 3 words. You think you're better? At first, I didn't even respond. But then more came. Dozens. Paragraphs. Accusations. Whining. Jealousy dripping from every line. He had seen a post someone tagged me in, something about an internship I'd landed in New York over the summer. It was a big deal. I was proud of it. And apparently, so was half my college circle, because they shared it like wildfire. And Jeremy? He couldn't take it. His tantrum wasn't just digital. Within days, it spilled into real life. Angry calls to my mom. Passive-aggressive rants on Facebook. Petty jabs during family dinners I didn't attend. He couldn't stand that I had built something without them. Without him. But the worst part, the part that pushed everything over the edge, came in the form of a family group chat screenshot that Kyle sent me one night. Jeremy, in a full meltdown, had sent a message that read, I don't care if he's successful. He's still a selfish little brat who ruined my party and made mom cry. He thinks he's better than us because he moved out? Let's see how long he lasts without daddy's money. And what my father replied, don't worry. He'll come crawling back when the real world hits him. That was it. That was the betrayal I didn't see coming. Because all this time, I thought maybe, just maybe, my dad had been the silent neutral one. The one who didn't pick sides, just wanted peace. But no, he never had my back either. And that's when I decided. I was done playing nice. I had kept my distance. I had kept my head down. But now, it was time they saw exactly what the forgotten son could do. There's a strange silence that follows betrayal. Not the kind you get when someone slaps you in the face, but the kind that settles in when someone you trusted lets you down in a way you didn't expect. I always knew Jeremy resented me in some way. That wasn't news. But seeing my dad, my own father, essentially agree with him, that hit harder than anything else. Not because I needed his money. I didn't. I was already making it on my own. But because deep down, a small part of me still believed he might come around. That maybe, once I got out and showed them I was serious, someone in that house would finally say, we were wrong. That illusion shattered with that message. He'll come crawling back when the real world hits him. Those were the words that played on loop in my head that night. I was in my dorm, sitting on the edge of my twin bed, phone screen burning my retinas, heart somewhere between rage and resignation. I didn't cry. I didn't punch a wall. I didn't scream. I just sat there, very still, as the weight of that sentence sank in, crawling back, as if I had ever leaned on them, as if I hadn't spent years being overlooked, dismissed, shoved aside for the golden boy with the dimming halo. It was in that moment I realized something important. I wasn't running away from them anymore. I was running toward something else, something better, something that didn't require their approval. But before I could climb, I had to fall first. And believe me, I did. My second semester hit like a brick wall. The excitement of freedom wore off fast, and the pressure of proving myself crept in hard. Between classes, my part-time job at a student cafe, and the internship applications I kept sending into the void, I barely slept. There were nights I'd fall asleep on my laptop, wake up with keyboard marks on my cheek and a half-finished essay blinking on the screen. Money was tight. My scholarship covered tuition and housing, but food, books, clothes, that was all on me. I remember one week I lived on oatmeal and peanut butter because I'd miscalculated my budget after buying a textbook that cost more than my winter jacket. I didn't tell anyone, not even Kyle. I just pushed through it, day by day. I told myself, this is temporary. They think you'll fail. Prove them wrong. I worked the early shift at the cafe every Friday and Sunday, which meant waking up at 5:30 a.m., walking through freezing slush just to serve burnt coffee to hungover seniors. Some mornings, I questioned whether it was worth it. Whether I should just quit and take the easier path, go home, let them forgive me, pretend nothing ever happened. But then I'd remember the party, that banner, that cake, that message from my dad, and I'd dig in harder. Rock bottom wasn't a single moment for me. It was a slow, grinding season, a string of days that blurred together, each one just a little heavier than the last. But even in that darkness, small sparks started to appear. I joined the film club officially in February. I'd gone to a few meetings in the fall, but now I committed. I started writing short scripts, helping other students with their projects, learning how to operate the club's camera equipment. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who didn't compare me to anyone else, who saw me as Caleb, not Jeremy's brother. It was jarring, being heard, being asked for input, being respected. One weekend, a senior named Maya asked if I wanted to help her shoot a short film for a student contest. She said she liked the way I edited a documentary segment for the club's YouTube channel. "It's subtle," she told me. "You know how to tell a story without yelling." I didn't even know how to respond to that. We spent 2 weeks filming her project. Long nights, barely any sleep, lots of bad cafeteria coffee. But it was fun. I felt useful. I felt good. When the film won 3rd place, she handed me the certificate like it was mine too. "You saved this thing," she said. "Seriously, you've got a gift." Those words stuck with me more than any birthday card I'd ever received. Around that same time, my screenwriting professor pulled me aside after class. "You've got something," he said. "You see the emotional layers, even in small moments. That's rare." He offered to mentor me, help me clean up a script and submit it to an undergraduate writing fellowship. It was competitive. Only 3 people got in each year. I wasn't expecting much, but I applied anyway. In the meantime, I picked up an extra shift at the cafe. I started tutoring kids in English composition at the student center. I helped Maya with another film project. I filled every spare hour with something that pushed me forward, inch by inch. I didn't post about any of it. Not on Instagram, not on Twitter. I wasn't trying to flex or show off. I wasn't interested in proving anything yet. I just wanted to build something solid, something real on my own terms. That's why it was such a shock when my internship announcement blew up. See, the campus had this digital bulletin board where students could share accomplishments. I posted about landing a summer internship at this mid-sized production studio in Manhattan. Not a huge name, but respected in indie film circles. I didn't think anyone outside my department would even notice. But Maya reposted it. Then the film club account did. Then one of my old high school friends shared it on Facebook with a caption like, "Look who's making moves." And just like that, it spread. That's when Jeremy saw it. I hadn't spoken to him in almost a year. Hadn't texted him. Hadn't responded to anything he sent. But that post? That set him off. Like I'd committed some kind of crime by succeeding without his permission. He sent me a storm of texts. Angry, bitter, insecure. He accused me of trying to make him look bad, of being fake, of turning the family against him by ghosting everyone. He said I was a show-off. That I only got the internship because they need diversity. I'm mixed, half Filipino on my mom's side. Not that he ever acknowledged that part of me growing up. But the most telling message? The one that showed me exactly where his head was? "You've always been jealous of me. Admit it." I stared at that line for a long time. Jealous? He really thought I spent my life envying him. The guy who peaked in high school, who quit college after 1 semester, who couldn't stand not being the center of attention for 1 single evening. It would have been funny if it weren't so sad. I didn't reply. Instead, I saved the screenshot. Because that meltdown wasn't just about me. It was about him realizing he no longer had a mirror to reflect himself in. I'd stepped out of the background, and now he was forced to see his own cracks. The fallout from his tantrum spread fast. He ran into my parents. Claimed I was rubbing success in his face. Said I was breaking up the family by refusing to come home for holidays. He even posted a Facebook status that vaguely accused me of manipulating people for clout, which, again, would have been laughable if it weren't so sad. But here's the thing about growing up under someone's shadow. Once you step out of it, they can't cast it anymore. I kept going. I finished the semester with a 3.8 GPA. My script got accepted into the fellowship. I spent the summer in New York working long hours for low pay but high experience. I met people who took me seriously. I networked. I learned. I watched how real productions worked. And every time I got on the subway or sat down at my tiny sublet desk, I reminded myself, I earned this. Every second of it. Back home, Jeremy spiraled. I didn't see it directly, but Cal kept me updated. Jeremy was back at my parents' house, jobless, bitter, constantly starting fights. He even tried to restart community college but dropped out after a month, blaming incompetent professors for his failing grades. He'd rant at my mom, complained that she let me get away with everything, even though I hadn't asked them for a single dime since I left. My parents started calling more frequently. Not to apologize. No, they were still too proud for that. but with little guilt trips disguised as concern. "We miss you," Mom would say. "Jeremy's having a hard time." Dad once texted, "I know things got messy, but you're still part of this family." But I wasn't falling for it. Not yet. They hadn't acknowledged what they did. They hadn't owned up to the favoritism, the dismissal, the years of silence. They just wanted things to go back to normal without earning the right to ask. And I had no intention of going back. Not until I was ready. And when I finally was. Let's just say I made sure my return wasn't quiet. There's a quote I heard once. "The best revenge is living well." It sounds wise. Elegant. Like something you'd find stitched on a pillow in your therapist's office. But the truth? That quote was written by someone who's never been humiliated by their own family on their 18th birthday. Someone who's never had to pretend they were okay while the people who were supposed to love them forgot they even existed. Living well was a start, sure. But for me, it wasn't enough. I didn't want to just escape the shadow of my family. I wanted to flip the lights on and show everyone exactly who had been standing in the dark all along. I wanted them to see me, not as the quiet one, not as Jeremy's brother, not even as the one who moved out, but as the man who built everything without their help and still stood taller than any of them ever imagined. But first, I needed patience, planning, precision. Revenge isn't about rage. It's not about yelling or fighting or posting angry paragraphs online. That's what Jeremy did. And look where that got him. Broke, bitter, and stewing in his own self-pity at my parents' house. No, my revenge had to be quiet. I wanted them to invite it. I wanted them to watch it unfold and realize, too late, that they had orchestrated their own undoing. It started with a message from Maya. This was a few weeks after my summer internship ended. I was back at school, prepping for junior year, when she texted me. "Remember Alex from the film fest? He's launching something. Wants to talk to you." Alex was a producer I'd met through Maya's short film the year before. Older, sharp, one of those guys who remembers names and shakes your hand like you're already important. I hadn't expected to hear from him again. We set up a video call. He was blunt. "I'm building a new digital production wing," he said. "Short-form documentaries, branded mini-films, social-first content. Young talent, fresh eyes. I want you to be one of the writers." I blinked. "Wait, like paid?" He laughed. "Not a lot, but enough. And it's remote. You can do it while finishing school. You'd be the youngest on the team. You interested?" I didn't even need to think. Yes, 100%. The job wasn't glamorous at first, writing voiceover scripts, drafting outlines for 5-minute human interest stories, fact-checking interview transcriptions. But it was real. It was industry. And I was making connections. I kept working my cafe job on weekends, but the digital gig gave me flexibility, and more importantly, credibility. That was phase 1. Phase 2 came when one of the directors in the studio circle, a guy named Rafi, took a liking to one of my short scripts. It was a quiet, introspective piece about a college student estranged from his family, trying to build a life alone. I hadn't told him it was basically my autobiography. He said, "This has teeth. You thought about directing it?" I hadn't. Not seriously. But the idea lodged in my brain like a match waiting to be struck. So I started planning. I spent weeks rewriting the script, tightening the dialogue, sharpening the emotional turns. I sent it to Maya, who gave me honest, brutal feedback and helped me polish it into something I was actually proud of. Then I submitted it to the campus film fund. They gave me a $3,000 grant. Not much in film terms, but enough to get started. We began filming that fall. It was small. Me, Maya, 2 actors from the theater department, and a borrowed camera from the club. We used campus buildings, dorms, and even a rundown diner off Main Street as shooting locations. I called it Second Son. I didn't tell anyone what it was really about, but I poured everything into that film. Every unspoken resentment, every quiet humiliation, every moment I'd been overlooked, minimized, passed over. It was all there, in the script, in the performances, in the cold lighting and the soft piano score I spent 2 nights composing on GarageBand. The last scene was just a close-up of the main character sitting at his own birthday party, surrounded by noise and people, utterly alone. The camera pulled back slowly, until his figure was small, forgotten, at the edge of the frame. When I watched the final cut, I cried. Not because I was sad, because it finally felt like someone saw me, even if that someone was me. We submitted the short to a regional student film festival. I didn't expect much. There were bigger productions, flashier stories, films with actual budgets and crews. But Second Son made the finals. And then it won. Best Short Film. Best Original Screenplay. A professor from another university came up to me afterward, shook my hand, and said, "That last scene? I haven't felt something like that in years." And here's where things started to get interesting. See, one of the judges on that panel was an alum from my old high school. A woman named Lila who now worked in media consulting. She remembered my name, not because of Jeremy, but because I'd been quiet and polite in her journalism class back in senior year. She reached out to me after the festival and said, "This might sound odd, but I know your parents." My stomach dropped. She continued, "They still live in Westwood, right? Nice people. Your brother, too." I didn't say anything. She smiled kindly. "Well, if you ever want help getting the film some press, small local papers, maybe an online feature, I know a few people." I thanked her, politely. Then I went home and started thinking. Press, local feature, a spotlight back home. That was phase 3. I didn't want fame. I didn't want to be a social media darling or an indie darling or any kind of darling. I just wanted one thing. I wanted the story they tried to erase me from, to circle back around and land right on their doorstep. So I sent a screener of Second Son to a small local arts blog that covers homegrown creatives. The writer, a guy named Dev, loved it. Said it was a haunting, emotionally honest portrayal of generational silence. He published a piece on it the following week. It wasn't viral or anything, but it got picked up by the local town Facebook group, the same group my mom practically lived on. And suddenly, everyone in Westwood was talking about it. Parents were tagging other parents. Teachers I hadn't spoken to in years left comments like, "I always knew Caleb was going places." Some of the parents Jeremy had been buddy-buddy with during his soccer days shared it with captions like, "Such a powerful piece." And from one of our own. Even the high school guidance counselor, who had worked alongside my mom, shared the article, writing an incredible short film by a former student. Watch until the end. It hits hard. I didn't reach out to my parents. I didn't have to, because they reached out to me. The first message came from my mom. "I saw the article. You made a movie? Why didn't you tell us?" Then another. "People are saying it's based on your life. Is that true?" And then the kicker. "I feel like you're painting us as villains. That's not fair." I didn't reply. She called. I let it ring. My dad messaged me next. "This is a low blow. Whatever your issues are, airing them in public isn't the answer." Jeremy didn't say anything directly, but someone told me he posted a story on Instagram that said, "Some people build careers on lies. Congrats, I guess." I laughed out loud when I saw it. They were squirming, and I hadn't even done anything to them. I just told the truth. Framed in fiction, wrapped in cinematography and soft piano chords. And that was the moment I knew I had power. They had spent years controlling the narrative. Jeremy, the golden boy. Caleb, the quiet shadow. The second son. But now the whole town was looking at me. And the final piece of the setup? That came when my university announced their annual alumni gala/showcase, hosted in my hometown. The department chair reached out, said they were screening select student works as part of the event. Asked if I'd like to introduce Second Son personally before the viewing. It was being held at the Westwood Community Theater, 3 blocks from my childhood home. I said yes, and then I rented 2 extra tickets. Because if there's one thing I've learned, you don't need to crash someone else's party when you can build a better one yourself and send them an invitation. There's a specific kind of silence that only exists in theaters. It's different from the silence of a library or a church. It's heavier. It hums. It's the collective breath-holding of 100 people all focused on the same frame, the same story. And on that night, the night my short film Second Son premiered in my hometown, I stood at the back of the Westwood Community Theater, watching an entire room sink into that silence. Rows of red velvet seats stretched out before me, filled with strangers and neighbors and teachers and students. But in the 5th row, a little left of center, sat 3 very familiar silhouettes. My mother, stiff in her church blazer, my father, arms folded tightly across his chest, and Jeremy, slouched so far into his seat, he looked like he was trying to disappear into the upholstery. I hadn't spoken to them in almost 2 years. No calls, no visits. The last words exchanged between us had been accusations, deflections, silence. And yet, here they were. They had RSVP'd. I knew they would. The university had framed the event as a celebration of local talent. They put my name in the flyers. They shared the event online. And as soon as my mom saw it posted by the PTA president, who added a caption that read, "Excited to see what Caleb's been up to. Sounds powerful," I knew she wouldn't be able to resist. Not because she missed me, because she hated not knowing what people were whispering about. So she dragged them there, probably convincing my dad it was a show of support and bribing Jeremy with the promise of being seen in public. The irony was so thick, I could have choked on it. They were finally coming to my event, not to hijack it, not to rewrite the story, but to sit in the dark and watch the truth unfold, one frame at a time. The lights dimmed, the screen lit up, and then my voice filled the room. I had recorded the intro myself, a short message to the audience before the film began. My face appeared on screen, older now, calmer, sharper than they probably remembered. "Hi, I'm Caleb Wren," I said. I wrote and directed Second Son as a way to process silence. The kind that builds over years until you start to believe your voice doesn't matter. This story isn't just about me. It's about anyone who's ever been made to feel invisible in their own family. I hope it reminds you to listen closer, especially to the people you think you already understand. And then it began. The film opened on a quiet shot of a birthday party in full swing. Laughter, music, clinking glasses, but the camera lingered on one person. The protagonist, seated at the edge of the patio table, half in frame. Forgotten. As the story unfolded, the parallels were unmistakable. Scenes of favoritism, rewritten narratives, emotional neglect. Moments where the protagonist tried to speak up, only to be brushed aside with phrases like, "Don't be so sensitive," or, "Why can't you just be happy for your brother?" And then came the birthday scene, the final gut punch. The camera panned across the crowd singing for the wrong person, the candles blown out by someone else, the protagonist standing in the background with a cupcake in his hand, alone. There were gasps. A few people shifted in their seats. I glanced toward row 5. Jeremy was staring straight ahead, jaw clenched. My dad was stone-faced. My mom had her hand pressed to her lips, eyes locked on the screen like she couldn't look away, or maybe, like she finally saw it. When the credits rolled, the silence remained. Heavier now. Thicker. Then applause. Slow at first, then steady. I stepped forward from the back of the room, toward the small podium near the screen. "Thank you all for coming," I said. My voice was steady, calm, no venom. No theatrics. This story was hard to tell. Not because I didn't know what happened, but because for a long time, I thought maybe it didn't matter. I thought maybe the version of events I remembered wasn't important enough to say out loud. I looked directly at row 5. But silence has a cost. And sometimes, the quietest people are carrying the loudest truths. So tonight, I wanted to honor those truths. No one clapped right away. Not until I stepped away from the mic. But as I walked down the aisle, dozens of people reached out, shook my hand, clapped my shoulder, said things like, "That hit home," or "I saw myself in that," or simply, "Thank you." I didn't turn to see if my parents or Jeremy stayed. I didn't need to, because outside the theater, as I stood under the awning soaking in the cool night air, I heard my name. Caleb. It was my mother. She approached me alone. My father and Jeremy were nowhere in sight. Her face looked pale in the streetlight, not from embarrassment, but from something heavier. Guilt, maybe. Or the realization that the son she'd ignored had grown into a man she didn't recognize. "That was a lot," she said. I said nothing. She looked down at her hands, then back up. "You could have talked to us." I raised an eyebrow. "I tried. You just weren't listening." She winced, but she didn't deny it. "Is that really how you remember things?" "Yes," I said, with the sharp, unflinching certainty of someone who'd waited years to be asked that question. She swallowed. "I didn't know it hurt you that much." "Because you never looked," I replied. "Because you were too busy making sure Jeremy had the perfect life, even if it meant letting me disappear." She stepped closer. "You're not invisible, Caleb. We love you." I smiled, small and sad. "Maybe. But love without effort is just decoration." She said nothing after that. Just stood there, mouth parted like she wanted to say more. But there was nothing left to give. No apology that would fix it. No quick fix that would unwrite the years of neglect. So I turned and walked away. As I reached the corner of the block, I saw Jeremy standing near my car. He looked up as I approached, arms crossed, the same defensive scowl he always wore when he felt the ground slipping under his feet. "You happy now?" he asked. "You made us look like monsters." "I didn't have to," I said. "You did that yourselves." He shook his head, sneering. All this just to prove you're better than me? I laughed genuinely. No, Jeremy. All this just to prove I was here. And I left him standing there, stunned in the glow of the theater marquee that still bore my name. In the weeks that followed, the film got picked up by an online streaming platform for student features. I started getting messages from people across the country, students, teachers, even therapists, all saying the same thing. This story mattered. Meanwhile, back in Westwood, the fallout was quiet but deep. My mom took a leave from the school. The guidance office restructured. PTA moms whispered. Former friends reached out less. Jeremy moved out of my parents' house 6 months later, after what Kyle later told me was a massive blow-up, where he accused them of ruining his reputation. He bounced around jobs, tried a YouTube channel, failed at it, and eventually stopped posting altogether. And my dad? He never reached out. Not once. That told me more than any apology ever could. But me? I kept going. I graduated with honors. Got hired full-time by the same production studio that gave me my start. Moved into a small apartment with creaky floors and a view of the skyline that made every all-nighter worth it. I kept writing, kept filming, kept telling stories for the people who'd been made to feel small. And every year, on my birthday, I light a candle. Not because I need a wish, but because sometimes the smallest flame is enough to burn down an entire false narrative. They built their story around Jeremy, but I wrote the ending. And this one's mine. I'm Aaron, 29 years old, and I've never been what you'd call the favorite, not the golden child, not the pride of the family, not even the one who gets invited to group photos without a reminder. My older brother, Derek, 34, has always worn that invisible crown. The successful one, the married one, the one who gave my parents grandkids, which apparently makes him the only person in our bloodline who counts anymore. I used to brush it off. I told myself I was just the quieter one, more independent, the black sheep, in the charming, misunderstood way. But it wasn't charming. And it stopped being tolerable the moment my parents made it clear, financially and emotionally, that I was just a bonus character in a story where Derek was the star. I didn't expect anything when my grandfather died. That man was a ghost for most of my life, some mysterious old figure who lived 3 states away and sent the same birthday card every year, a generic best wishes with a crisp $20 bill inside. But apparently, he had been paying attention. He'd seen what I didn't even know he was watching. The Christmases where I was handed socks while Derek's kids tore open drones and tablets. The Thanksgivings where I carved the turkey, cleaned the dishes, and still sat at the kids' table while Derek gave toasts about family values. The birthdays forgotten. The calls never returned. The years I spent building my own life from scratch, working 2 jobs in my early 20s, getting a degree online, skipping holidays because I couldn't afford the gas to drive home, while Derek got help in the form of loans that were never expected to be paid back. My grandfather noticed all of it, and in the end, he left me something I didn't even know existed, a sizable inheritance. The call came on a Tuesday. I was in the middle of making lunch. Nothing fancy, just eggs and toast, and my mom called out of the blue. No, how are you? No small talk. Just, so your grandfather's attorney called. You're getting a pretty big check. I blinked. Literally didn't know how to respond. Wait, what? I said, half laughing. I thought she was joking. My mom doesn't joke. He left you the house, she said, like it tasted sour in her mouth. And the investment account. Derek's only getting the boat. That was it. That was the beginning. I could almost hear the storm clouds forming through the silence on the other end of the line. She didn't congratulate me. Didn't ask how I felt. Just this flat, cold pause. Then, you know your brother could use that money more than you. He has kids, Aaron. It wasn't even subtle. That line haunted me for days. He has kids. As if that fact alone invalidated everything I'd done to get where I was. As if being single, child-free, and living in a modest 1-bedroom apartment disqualified me from receiving kindness or fairness. I didn't even know how much the inheritance was at that point. I hadn't called the attorney yet. But she had, clearly. And so had Derek. Because 2 days later, I got a text from him. No greeting. No preamble. You know you owe this to me, right? I stared at the screen. I must have reread it 20 times. Owe him? Owe him what? The money my grandfather left to me? I was still trying to wrap my head around the fact that I even had an inheritance at all, and now I was supposed to feel guilty about it? I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I didn't trust myself not to explode. I finally called the lawyer that Friday. His name was Thomas Gerber, and he sounded exactly like someone named Thomas Gerber would sound: measured, polite, slightly tired of human interaction. He confirmed everything my mother had said. The house, fully paid off and located in a quiet suburb an hour outside the city, was mine, along with an investment account worth just under $320,000. Derek, on the other hand, got the family boat, which was apparently worth around $50,000. A generous gift, but not life-changing. Thomas explained it gently, like he expected me to react badly. But I was too stunned to be anything but quiet. I hadn't talked to my grandfather in almost 5 years, and yet he'd left me this. Not because I was the favorite, but because, as the letter he'd written made clear, he wanted to even the scales a bit. That letter was just 2 paragraphs long, but I reread it more times than I can count. He said he'd seen how I was treated, that he admired my independence, that he was proud of the man I'd become, even if no one else ever said it out loud. I cried. I don't cry often, but I cried sitting alone on my hand-me-down couch with a letter from a man I barely knew who somehow understood me better than my own parents. Of course, that little moment of peace didn't last. The next week, Derek called. Not texted, called. Which was unusual enough that I thought maybe something had happened. Maybe he wanted to bury the hatchet, talk like grown-ups, figure this out calmly. I was stupid to think that. "Hey," he said, in a voice that was already laced with condescension. "I assume you've processed everything by now." I didn't know what he meant by processed, so I stayed quiet. He continued. "Look, I'm not trying to be a jerk, all right? But come on, man. You don't need all that. You're single. No kids. No mortgage. I mean, what are you even going to do with it?" I blinked again. These people really loved reminding me I had no children. "I don't think that matters," I said. "Grandpa left it to me. That's it." There was a pause. Then he laughed, this short, ugly sound that sounded more like a scoff. "You know you're not being fair, right? I have 3 kids. Do you know how expensive it is to raise 3 kids? And the house. You don't even want a house. You're a city guy." I swear, I felt my hand grip the phone tighter. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth would crack. "I didn't ask for any of this, Derek," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "It's not about what I want. It's about what Grandpa decided." He didn't like that. He hung up. Then came the messages. From Mom. From Dad. Even my aunt, who I hadn't heard from in years. All variations of the same theme. Be the bigger person. Help your brother. Family first. It's just money. He needs it more. You'll understand when you have your own family someday. It was like they'd all been handed a script. And the implication was clear. If I didn't roll over and hand Derek what he wanted, I was selfish. Immature. Cold. Ungrateful. Ungrateful. For what? It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about control. About them realizing, maybe for the first time, that I had something they couldn't take or guilt me into giving away. A week later, I got an email from Thomas Gerber. Subject line: urgent, attempted contact regarding inheritance. Apparently, Derek had reached out directly to the law firm and asked if there was a legal pathway to reallocate the inheritance. He'd literally tried to contest the will. Not because there was any fraud. Not because there was any technicality. But because he felt it was unfair. The attorney told him, politely but firmly, that the will was solid. That my grandfather had been of sound mind. That there were no grounds for a challenge. I expected that to be the end. It wasn't. That Sunday, I got a message from my mom. Transfer it to him. Or don't bother coming home. No hello. No context. Just that. I sat there with my phone in my hand, staring at those words. Transfer it to him. Or don't bother coming home. I didn't cry that time. I smiled. And that was the moment I knew something had changed. That night, I didn't call anyone. I didn't argue. I didn't send a dramatic response. I booked a flight. I changed my passwords. I locked down my accounts. I updated the security system on the house, my house now. I sent a single email to Thomas, authorizing him to handle all future communication through him, and told him I wanted to discuss next steps for securing the property. Then I went to bed, phone on silent. When I woke up, 43 missed calls, 1 rage-fueled voicemail from my dad. And that was just the beginning. It started small, as these things always do. Little digs, passive-aggressive comments. I had foolishly assumed that going low contact after the transfer it to him message would buy me peace. Instead, It seemed to provoke something worse, like I had broken some unspoken rule of the family hierarchy, and now they were all lining up to put me back in my place. I didn't go home for Easter. Not a big deal, right? I'd never really been a fan of big family holidays anyway. But in the days leading up to it, the messages started again. From Mom, you could at least make an appearance. Derek's kids want to see their uncle. From Dad, it's not about you, Aaron. It's about family. Stop acting like a victim. From Derek, of course. Enjoy spending Grandpa's money alone. So I ignored them, made myself a quiet dinner, watched a movie, tried to enjoy the silence. Then the photos started rolling in on Facebook. The whole family in their pastel best, Derek's kids holding giant plastic eggs, my parents beaming in the background. And then, because the universe couldn't resist a good jab, my mom posted a photo captioned, "So grateful for family. All of our blessings in one room." Oh, I didn't even like Facebook. I rarely checked it. But that night, I checked it 3 times. Not because I missed them, but because I needed the reminder. I needed to remember how quickly they erased me when I stopped serving their narrative. A week after Easter, I got an email from a real estate agent. It was about the house, my grandfather's house, asking if I was still planning to list it. I hadn't even contacted a realtor yet. Confused, I called the agency. The woman on the phone was chipper, polite, but clearly a little puzzled. "Oh, I spoke to a Mr. Derek last week. He said he was representing you as family and wanted to get the ball rolling." I almost dropped the phone. I clarified that no, I had not authorized anyone to represent me or sell the house. She apologized profusely and said she'd make a note on the file, but the damage was done. He had tried to sell my house. My house. And not quietly, either. According to the agent, he'd already taken photos. Interior photos. That was the part that made my blood run cold. Because I hadn't given him a key. So how the hell did he get in? I drove out to the property the next day. It was a quiet Wednesday morning, and I made the hour-long trip with a pit in my stomach. The neighborhood was peaceful as ever, well-manicured lawns, retirees walking small dogs, mailboxes with flags politely raised. But when I pulled into the driveway, I immediately saw it. The lockbox. A chunky black realtor lockbox hanging from the doorknob. He'd changed the damn locks. I stood there for a full minute, just staring. My own house. My inheritance. The only thing that had ever been mine. And he had waltzed in and claimed it like it was nothing. Rage doesn't come in a flash, like movies show. Not always. Sometimes it comes in waves. Slow, creeping, unrelenting. I didn't scream. I didn't punch anything. I just pulled out my phone and took pictures. Of the lockbox. The exterior. The mailbox with my name on it. I walked the perimeter and filmed a slow video. Then I drove straight to the police station. It was the first time I said it out loud, to someone official. "I think my brother broke into my house." The officer was surprisingly sympathetic. He took the report, asked if I had proof of ownership. I did, and told me to follow up with a locksmith and a lawyer. That evening, I had the locks changed again. This time, with a security system installed. Cameras. Motion alerts. A smart doorbell. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want them to know what I was planning. I just wanted to watch. Sure enough, 3 nights later, the motion sensor went off. I was at my apartment, but my phone lit up with the alert. Front door. Activity detected. I opened the app and there he was, Derek, standing on the porch in a hoodie, fumbling with the lockbox that was no longer there. He looked confused. Angry. He rattled the doorknob. And then he looked straight into the camera. He saw the light. Realized what it was. He didn't say anything, but I could see it in his face. He knew. I never called him. Never mentioned it. But the silence that followed was thick with something unspoken. A week later, I got a certified letter in the mail. My parents had hired a lawyer. The letter was a request, polite, legally worded, but clear. They wanted me to consider relinquishing partial rights to the estate in favor of Derek. It framed it as a gesture of goodwill. Said it was in the interest of family harmony. My father had signed it. Not my mother. Not Derek. My father. The same man who once told me, "You've got to earn your way in this world, Aaron." Now he wanted me to give away what I'd earned through grief. Through estrangement. Through silent, painful years of being the one no one fought for. I didn't respond. Instead, I went back to the house. Sat in my grandfather's old recliner. The one they hadn't gotten around to selling or donating yet. I sat there and just existed. Looked around at the dusty shelves, the old lamp with the crooked shade, the faint smell of leather and time. That's when I saw the photo, tucked behind a stack of old Reader's Digests, on the bottom shelf of the bookshelf near the fireplace. A framed picture of me and Grandpa. I didn't remember it being taken. I must have been 19 or 20. We were sitting outside somewhere, maybe his porch, and I had this awkward grin. He looked proud. Tired, but proud. That photo broke me more than any betrayal. Because it made it real. He'd seen me, when no one else did. I left the picture there, like a totem. The next day, I got another text from Derek. "You're being ridiculous. You know this isn't over, right?" I didn't answer. 2 days after that, my aunt called. The one who never calls. She sounded out of breath, like she was pacing. "I'm staying out of it," she started. "But you should know. Your parents are planning to go public about this." I blinked. Go public? What does that even mean? They're telling everyone. The cousins. The neighbors. Church. That you're withholding money from Derek. That Grandpa's will was manipulated. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It wasn't funny, but it was absurd. Manipulated? I hadn't even spoken to the man in 5 years. If anything, I'd assumed Derek would get everything. But that was the play. That was always the play. If they couldn't shame me privately, they'd shame me publicly. Sure enough, the next Sunday, the Facebook posts started again. "Mom, some people forget that family is a responsibility, not a competition." "Dad, sad to see what greed does to a man." "Derek's wife, Megan, my babies don't deserve this. They just want their uncle back." And then, because nothing in this family happens in isolation, I got an email from my job's HR department. A concerned community member had sent in an anonymous email claiming I was engaging in a legal dispute over contested assets and that it might affect my reliability. It was subtle, vague enough to be dismissed. But still, someone had tried to jeopardize my career. That's when I knew. This wasn't about the inheritance. It wasn't even about the house. It was about power and punishment. They couldn't believe I'd stood up for myself, that I had something they couldn't touch. So now they were going to burn the earth around me until I crawled back. But I wasn't crawling back. I was done crawling. I didn't react the way they expected. That's the part that probably confused them the most. No angry replies. No long-winded explanations. No family group chat meltdown. I didn't show up at their door to defend myself. I didn't beg to be understood. I didn't even post my side of the story on Facebook, which, in this family, is practically considered silence under oath. Instead, I got quiet. And when I say quiet, I mean I stepped all the way back. From everyone. My phone went on silent permanently. I stopped checking notifications. I deleted Facebook entirely. I even changed my number, not out of spite, but out of necessity. Because every time I saw my dad's name pop up or Derek's text light up my screen, my chest tightened like I'd swallowed a fist. And I couldn't keep living like that. But let me be clear, I didn't do it because I was strong. I did it because I was tired. There's this moment when you hit a kind of emotional rock bottom. Not the loud kind, not the crying on the floor kind, but the still kind. Like sitting at the bottom of a drained swimming pool, looking up at the world above you and realizing no one's coming down to get you. That was me, alone in a house full of someone else's furniture, eating microwave noodles at a plastic fold-out table because I hadn't had the time or energy to move real furniture in yet. That house, my inheritance, felt less like a gift and more like a battlefield. Every corner held some reminder of the war I didn't ask for. The guest bedroom Derek tried to list in the online home photos. The empty living room where they once hosted holidays without inviting me. Even the front porch, which I'd started calling the scene of the lockbox in my head. So yeah, I stopped talking to them. But that didn't mean the noise stopped. Word traveled fast. My cousin Brian texted me one night. "Yo man, are you really suing your parents?" I wasn't. Not yet. But the rumor mill had upgraded me from selfish to legally hostile, and the backlash followed me like a bad smell. Suddenly, I was the reason the family group vacation didn't happen. I was the one who split the family apart. I was making things weird for Derek's kids at school. One of my old high school friends even messaged me saying my dad had approached his mom at church to pray for Aaron's heart. I was being painted as the villain in a story they wrote without me. And for a while, I let it get to me. There was a stretch of weeks where I barely got out of bed. I stopped replying to work emails. My boss, a good guy, to his credit, called me and asked if I was okay. I lied and said I had the flu. He gave me the rest of the week off. I spent it watching documentaries and staring at the ceiling fan spin above my head. One night, I broke. It wasn't dramatic. I was brushing my teeth and caught my reflection in the mirror. Hair a mess, hoodie stained with ramen broth, eyes sunken and tired. And out loud, like an idiot, I whispered, "What if they're right? What if I was selfish? What if I should just give it to Derek? What if I was making too big a deal out of it? Wouldn't it be easier to just let go, hand it over, go back to being the quiet one who never made waves?" That thought sat with me all night. But something funny happened the next morning. I woke up. That's it. Just woke up. Got out of bed. Took a long shower. Cleaned the kitchen. Ordered a real table off Wayfair. Not because I had some motivational epiphany or watched a TikTok about healing. Just because I realized the world wasn't going to stop spinning for me. No one was coming to save me. And if I didn't want to drown in their version of my life, I had to start building my own. So I did. Slowly. The first thing I did was renovate the house. I didn't even plan to live in it long term, but I wanted to make it mine. To take back the narrative, I started with the kitchen, ripped out the cabinets myself, watched YouTube videos about tile work, painted until my hands cramped. It was messy and slow and completely out of my comfort zone, but it gave me something I hadn't had in months, a sense of control. Neighbors started noticing. One of them, Linda, late 60s, dog owner, excellent baker, brought me lemon bars and introduced herself. She'd known my grandfather. Said he used to wave from the porch every morning. We talked for 20 minutes. Nothing deep. Just normal. The kind of conversation I hadn't had in too long. I didn't realize how much I missed being seen until I wasn't constantly ducking behind guilt. The house started to change. And so did I. At work, I found my footing again. Got involved in a new client project. Led a few calls. My boss noticed. Gave me a raise. Said I seemed different lately, in a good way. I smiled and thanked him. Didn't tell him it was because I'd finally stopped carrying a family on my back that never really carried me. And the inheritance? I didn't blow it. I didn't buy a sports car or fly to Bora Bora. I met with a financial advisor. Smart guy. Explained things in a way that didn't make me feel like a child. He helped me split the account into 3 parts. One for savings, one for investment, and one for something he called joy spending. I like that. I used the joy fund to do one thing. I booked a solo trip to Kyoto. Just me, a backpack, and no schedule. When I told Linda, she lit up. Said my grandfather always wanted to go to Japan. Never did. He'd be proud, she said, of the man you're becoming. I don't know why that hit me so hard. Maybe because no one else had said it. Not once. Not even close. But I was becoming someone. Not despite what happened, but because of it. The silence from my family didn't last forever, of course. After a few months of quiet, the messages started again. But this time different. Derek messaged me on WhatsApp, of all things. A simple, "Can we talk?" I didn't reply. Then an email from my mom. "We miss you. Derek's kids ask about you." Still no mention of the house, or the will, or the threats. Just this vague, guilt-drenched attempt to reel me back in. I sat with it for a while. Wondered if I should respond. But instead, I pulled out the old photo of me and Grandpa, the one from the bookshelf, and set it on my new desk next to my laptop. The house smelled different now. Fresh paint, clean wood, a hint of lemon from the candles I'd started lighting when I worked from home. It was mine. I was mine. That realization was everything. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to them. Not my worth. Not my success. Not my right to exist. I didn't reply to the message. But I didn't hate them, either. I just didn't belong to them anymore. And that, more than anything, was the beginning of the rise. It's strange how quiet clarity can be. Not the kind you get in a movie. No orchestral swell, no slow-motion walk into the sunset. Just small, deliberate steps that start adding up to something louder than words. You stop asking permission. You stop hoping they'll change. You stop explaining your side to people who've already chosen not to hear it. You start thinking like someone who finally knows what they're worth. And that's exactly where I was. A year had passed since the will was read. In that time, I'd transformed the house from a battlefield into a home, my home. The kitchen sparkled with Subway tile I laid myself. The study smelled like books and coffee instead of dust and bitterness. The guest room had become a sanctuary of plants and sunlight. I even named it Room B, after my grandfather, Benjamin. I didn't tell anyone that. It was my quiet tribute. Financially, I was stable. Better than stable, actually. My job had promoted me. Twice. My savings were healthy. My investments were growing. My mental space? Clearer than it had ever been. And yet, I couldn't let it go. Not the house. Not the money. The betrayal. I could forgive people who made mistakes. But what they did wasn't a mistake. They calculated it. They tried to take something that wasn't theirs, not because they needed it, but because they believed it should be theirs. Because Derek had kids. Because I was just Aaron. Because, in their eyes, I didn't count unless I was giving something up. And the worst part? They still thought they got away with it. Just because I'd gone quiet. They didn't know silence wasn't surrender. Silence was strategy. It started when I found the group photo. It was an old picture from 2 years before Grandpa passed. Thanksgiving. Everyone crammed into the backyard, pretending they weren't secretly irritated at each other. My parents in the center. Derek, arms around his wife and kids. My aunt and uncle on the left. And there I was, all the way on the far edge, barely visible behind a tree branch. I hadn't seen it in years. But something about it clicked now. Because I remembered taking that photo. Literally. I'd used the timer, set up the tripod, and told everyone where to stand. Then I sprinted across the yard to get into the frame, and got shoved to the edge so Derek could be in the middle. Typical. I stared at that picture for a long time. And I remembered something else. Derek had made a toast that day. Something smarmy about legacy and family sticking together. Everyone clapped like he was JFK reincarnated. I remembered the way he looked at me from across the table, already dismissing me, already planning to inherit the world by default. And it hit me. They believed legacy belonged to him. But I owned it now. And I knew just how to remind them. Step 1 was the house. I didn't want to just live in it. I wanted to turn it into something visible. Something that shouted from the rooftop. This was never yours. So I hired an architect. Not just any architect. A former classmate of mine named Theo who'd started a design firm in the city. We weren't close in college, but we bumped into each other at a seminar last spring and exchanged info. I told him I wanted to restore the house, but keep the bones. Modernize the interior, but preserve the soul. He was into it immediately. I love this style, he said, walking through the halls with a sketch pad. 1950s Americana, but it's got these subtle craftsman touches. We can really bring that forward. I nodded, watching him run his hand along the windowsills. I wanted to feel like a place someone earned. Not inherited. Earned. He didn't ask questions. Just got to work. And I paid him, up front. Nothing says freedom like writing a check without flinching. Step 2 was the paper trail. I started gathering every document I could get my hands on. The will, the property deed, the emails from Thomas Gerber, the police report from when Derek tried to break in, the screenshots of my family's social media posts, the messages from Derek, my parents, my aunt. I organized them into a digital folder with tabs labeled legal, emotional abuse, property dispute, public slander, online harassment. Not because I planned to sue, but because I wanted the option. Because power isn't just about money or revenge. It's about leverage. And when you've spent your whole life being the one they thought would never fight back, nothing terrifies them more than realizing you've been documenting everything. Step 3. I started asking questions. Not to my family. To their circle. It began with Linda, my neighbor. She and my grandfather used to talk on the porch a lot. She remembered things. Did you know Derek tried to sell this house? I asked her casually one afternoon as we drank iced tea in her backyard. Her eyes went wide. He what? Yeah, I said. Had a realtor here and everything. Before the will was even fully executed. She blinked. Your grandfather would have, well, he'd be livid. He kind of was, I said, smiling faintly. Posthumously. We laughed, but the gears in my head were turning. I started reaching out to people who'd known my grandfather. His church friends. His old fishing buddy. The guy at the hardware store who sold him birdseed every spring. They all remembered me. Some vaguely. Some more fondly than I expected. One woman, Mrs. Palmer, an old friend of his from Sunday choir, told me something that chilled me. He once told me, she said over the phone, that he was worried your family would eat you alive if he didn't intervene. I swallowed hard. She continued. He said, Aaron's good. Not loud, but good. And good men get steamrolled if no one steps in. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just my fight. This was my responsibility. To honor what he tried to protect. So I started writing. It wasn't a revenge letter. It wasn't even for them. It was for me. I wrote down everything they'd ever said to make me feel smaller. Every time I was made to feel like a burden. Every gift Derek got that I didn't. Every chore I did while they watched TV. Every family gathering where I was the afterthought. Every moment I let them make me question if I was worth loving. And then I wrote down everything I'd done despite them. Got my degree. Held down 2 jobs at once. Paid off my debt. Bought my first car. Got promoted. Traveled alone. Rebuilt a house from the ground up. It was a long list. Longer than I expected. And at the bottom, I wrote, I will no longer apologize for who I had to become to survive the people who refused to see me. I folded that list and tucked it into the drawer next to my bed. Not because I needed to look at it, but because one day they might. And when they did, I wanted them to know I remembered everything. The final step of the setup came almost by accident. Theo had finished the blueprints. The permits were filed. The renovations were underway. And as I was walking through the house with him, admiring the early changes, he said something that stuck. You know, he said, running his hand along the new stair banister. This place has history. If it were mine, I'd name it. I raised an eyebrow. Name it? Sure, he shrugged. People name properties all the time. Especially homes with legacy. You've got something special here. That night, I sat in the living room, my living room, staring at the fireplace. And then it came to me. The Benjamin house. Not flashy, not dramatic, just his name. But it felt right. Like an echo of everything he gave me. Not just the inheritance, but the belief that I was worth fighting for. I filed the paperwork the next day, created a website, registered the property as a small retreat space for writers and artists, booked the first guest for the summer, an author friend of mine who needed a quiet place to finish her novel. And just like that, the house stopped being a symbol of pain. It became a mission, a way to rewrite the legacy. My legacy. And as for my family, they still hadn't seen what was coming. But they would, because I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The housewarming invite was never meant for them. But I sent it anyway. A cream-colored card, simple embossed lettering. You are cordially invited to the reopening of the Benjamin house, a creative retreat and legacy home. Date, time, website link, RSVP optional. No signature, no explanation. I sent it to my parents' address, to Derek's, even to my aunt who once told me, family sticks together, but not everyone is glue. I knew they'd get it. I knew it would burn. And honestly, that was the point. The official reopening was nothing extravagant, just 30 or so people, mostly creatives, neighbors, and a few friends from work. The house had been transformed. Open concept living space, clean Scandinavian lines mixed with warm heritage elements. The dining room still had Grandpa's original table, but now it sat beneath a chandelier I found at a vintage shop. The back porch was rebuilt entirely, facing the woods with a wraparound railing and hanging string lights. It wasn't a palace. It was dignity. The new sign above the door read, The Benjamin House, established 1957/reclaimed 2025. It was subtle, but I knew it would strike exactly where I needed it to. Derek saw the website first. I know this because he messaged me the night before the opening. What the hell is this? You turned Grandpa's house into a business. I stared at his message, sipping a cup of tea, and finally wrote back. I turned it into something that gives back. You tried to sell it. He left it on read. Good. Because the revenge was never going to be explosive. No lawsuits. No screaming matches. I had something better. Visibility. Every person they knew would see the announcement. The church friends. The neighbors. The old family friends who had grown quiet over the years, but still watched Facebook like it was the evening news. I'd uploaded the full renovation process as a blog on the website. Pictures, updates, even a short video walkthrough narrated by Theo. In the opening credits, I had included a dedication for Benjamin Moore, who saw value where others only saw silence. It wasn't petty. It wasn't even aimed at them, but they took it that way. A few days after the launch, Mom finally called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was tight, controlled, like she was trying not to let anything spill over. Your father and I feel very disappointed by how you've handled this. There were ways to include the family, but you've made this whole thing about yourself. It's sad, Aaron. Really sad. I saved the voicemail. Listened to it once. Then never again. Because I already knew how they operated. Any power I claimed was selfish. Any boundary I set was betrayal. Any success I built outside their system was a threat. But this time, they had no control. And that, more than anything, was the revenge. Not the money. Not the property. Not even the website or the retreat guests or the full booking calendar. The real revenge was this. They didn't matter anymore. And when people no longer have the power to hurt you, but know that they once did, that's the kind of silence that drives them mad. But I wasn't done. There was one more thing. I hired a videographer, a local filmmaker I met at a community arts event. I told her I wanted to create a short documentary, nothing huge, just a 10-minute piece for the website and YouTube channel. She asked what it was about. I told her the truth. It's about legacy, about reclaiming it, about what happens when someone quietly invests in the black sheep of the family, and how that changes everything. She loved it. We filmed over the course of a week. She captured the renovations, the letters my grandfather wrote, the old family photos I found in storage, the stories from Linda and Mrs. Palmer. I narrated most of it. My voice shook during some parts, but I didn't edit those out. The final video was titled, "The House He Gave Me, A Quiet Inheritance." I uploaded it. Within 2 weeks, it hit 20,000 views. I didn't expect that. People started reaching out. Strangers, saying how much it resonated, how they had similar families, how they were the invisible ones too. One guy said he cried watching it. A woman emailed me saying it inspired her to go back to school at 42. Another wanted to visit the house, said she hadn't written poetry in a decade, but watching that video made her pick up a pen again. I kept every message, not because I needed validation, but because they were proof that I wasn't alone. Then came the fallout. It started when my dad's coworker apparently saw the video. I found out through my cousin, who texted, "Uncle Frank is losing it. Says someone at his office shared your video during lunch. He's mad you're airing private family history online." That made me smile, because that was the fear, wasn't it? Not that I was lying, but that I was telling the truth, and that people believed me. My aunt unfriended me on every platform. My mother posted a long-winded status about narcissists who rewrite history. My brother? Radio silence. Until one night, I got a letter. A real letter. Handwritten. From Derek. It was 2 pages long. The first half was anger disguised as diplomacy. He said I misrepresented him. That he never meant to take anything from me. That he was just trying to protect the family legacy. And then, near the end, the tone changed. It got quiet. He wrote, "I don't know why Grandpa chose you. I don't think I'll ever understand it. But it's clear now that he saw something in you the rest of us didn't. Maybe we were too busy looking in mirrors." That line stuck with me. It was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get. But I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Because forgiveness is not the same as access. They could heal on their own time. But they wouldn't do it in my house. The Benjamin House opened officially for its first full retreat in May. For writers, 2 painters, and 1 digital artist stayed for 10 days. I cooked for them on weekends. We had porch talks, lit bonfires, shared stories about healing, creation, and what it means to start over. One night, a writer from Vermont told me, "This place feels like it was built by someone who knows what it's like to not be heard." I smiled. "I do." She nodded. "Well, you're heard now." And I was. By people who mattered. By people who saw me, not as a wallet, not as a scapegoat, not as a failure, but as someone who rebuilt a broken legacy into something worth passing on. That fall, I planted a tree in the backyard. A sugar maple. Grandpa loved those. I stood there after the digging was done, hands muddy, sun setting. And I said, out loud, for the first time, "Thank you for choosing me." The wind rustled the branches. And I swear, for a second, it felt like an answer. Because in the end, this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. About becoming the man they tried to erase, and doing it without asking for permission. I never told my family the full truth about what I was building, but I think they figured it out eventually. Because legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you do with it. And I had finally done something that no one in my family had the courage to do. I chose to begin again. Quietly. Steadily. Permanently. And I never looked back. My name's Alex. I'm 23, and last Saturday was supposed to be one of the biggest milestones of my life. My college graduation. For years of pulling all-nighters, juggling 2 part-time jobs, living on instant noodles, and constantly telling myself it would all be worth it. I was the first in my family to even make it to college, let alone graduate. I thought that would mean something to them. A week before the ceremony, I texted the family group chat, "My graduation's on Saturday. Hope you can make it." I'd already sent them the official invite months earlier, but I figured this was a gentle reminder. I watched the typing bubbles appear, then vanish, then reappear. My brother, Matt, finally replied, "We'll be in Vegas, maybe next time." No congratulations. No, sorry we can't make it. Just Vegas. My chest tightened, but before I could even respond, my mom chimed in, "Don't make this about you." I just stared at the screen for a few seconds, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I could have argued. I could have begged. Instead, I simply typed, "Understood." That word, understood, felt like swallowing glass. It wasn't that I was shocked. Matt's been the golden child since we were kids, the one who could crash Dad's car and still be praised for learning responsibility. I've always been the afterthought, the one who was too sensitive, too serious, too dramatic. But still, a part of me had held on to the hope that this day, of all days, would be different. That they'd show up, smile, take pictures, maybe even say they were proud. I put my phone down and sat there in the quiet of my apartment. The blinds were half closed, letting in strips of late afternoon sunlight that felt far too warm for how cold my chest felt. I knew my family wasn't perfect. I'd accepted that years ago, but this was different. This was them telling me, in no uncertain terms, that my accomplishment didn't matter, that I didn't matter. It's funny how little moments from childhood can flash in your mind when you're hurt. I remembered the time I was 12 and won a regional art competition. My mom didn't come to the award ceremony because Matt had a baseball game, one he didn't even play in because he was resting his arm. I remembered sitting in the auditorium, clutching my certificate, and scanning the crowd for a face that never appeared. That same hollow feeling crept in now, wrapping around my ribs like a vice. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that I had friends who'd be there, professors who believed in me, and that I'd built this achievement on my own. But the truth was, a part of me still craved their approval. That gnawing ache of wanting them to care, it never really went away. The days leading up to graduation felt heavier than I expected. I'd be at work, folding clothes in the back of the store, and suddenly I'd picture my family laughing in Vegas while I walked across the stage. I'd open Instagram and see Matt's wife posting, "Can't wait for our trip," with pictures of luggage and champagne flutes. I didn't even want to open the group chat anymore. Every unread message felt like a stone in my stomach. By Friday night, the reality had set in. They weren't coming. No last minute, we changed our minds. No surprise appearance. My dad hadn't even replied to my text. And yet, in some strange way, their absence started to feel freeing. If they weren't going to be there, then this day wasn't about them at all. It would be mine, mine to remember, mine to own. What I didn't know then was that while they were packing for Vegas, something else was brewing in the background. Something that would pull their attention away from slot machines and poolside cocktails. Something that would make them wish they'd been anywhere but where they were. And it all started with a single phone call I didn't expect to get that night. The call came just after 8 p.m. Friday night. I was sitting at my kitchen table, trying to iron my gown without scorching it, when my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in months. Aunt Lisa. She's my mom's older sister, the family member who's always been sort of on the outside like me. Not because she did anything wrong, but because she never played into my parents' little hierarchy. We'd talk once in a blue moon, usually when she caught wind of something she thought I should know. I answered, and after the usual small talk, her voice dropped lower. "Alex, I just thought you should know what they've been saying about you." It was like a stone dropped in my stomach. Apparently, while I'd been counting down the days to graduation, my mom had been telling anyone who'd listen that I was making too big a deal about it and acting like graduating is some huge accomplishment. She'd told relatives I'd been milking my degree for attention and that it was sad how much I wanted people to come. Matt, of course, had added his usual brand of charm, saying that I shouldn't expect the whole family to drop everything for something everyone does. I felt my throat tighten. It wasn't enough for them not to show up. They had to make sure no one else thought it mattered either. Lisa must have sensed my silence because she quickly added, "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. And I'll be there tomorrow." Front row. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, my chest buzzing with a mix of anger and resignation. I thought about the time Matt got promoted to assistant manager at his job, a job my dad had pulled strings to get him, and my parents threw him a backyard party with balloons, catered food, and a slideshow. I remembered how they'd posted about it all over Facebook, calling him an inspiration. I remembered how, when I got accepted into my college program, my mom's first comment had been, "That's nice, but you know, It's going to be expensive. Saturday morning, I woke up earlier than I needed to. The sky was still pale with dawn, the city quiet except for the occasional whoosh of a passing car. I made coffee and sat in silence, letting the bitterness in my cup match the bitterness in my chest. I checked the group chat out of habit, nothing from them. But Matt had posted on his Instagram story a selfie at the airport bar, drink in hand, captioned, "Vegas, baby." My mom was tagged in a picture of her holding a mimosa, beaming like it was the happiest day of her life. At the ceremony, Lisa kept her word. She sat in the front row, waving like a proud parent when I walked across the stage. I smiled for the cameras, but the whole time there was this quiet hum in the back of my mind. A reminder that the people who should have been there most were hundreds of miles away, spending money they didn't have in a city that didn't care about them. Afterward, Lisa insisted on taking me out to lunch. We found a small cafe near campus, and for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. We laughed, we shared dessert. She asked questions about my plans and actually listened to the answers. I didn't realize how badly I needed that until I had it. But just as we were finishing up, my phone started buzzing on the table. It was my mom, then Matt, then my dad. Call after call, one right after the other. I just stared at the screen, confused. Vegas was 3 hours behind us. It was still morning there. Something in my gut told me this wasn't about them suddenly realizing they'd made a mistake. Something had happened. I let it go to voicemail, but the texts started pouring in. "Call me now. Where are you? You need to see the news." I could feel my pulse in my ears. Lisa noticed my expression and leaned in, her voice low. "Alex, what's going on?" I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the first text, my mind racing. And then, like a ripple before a wave, I caught the first glimpse of what had just turned their entire Vegas trip upside down. The first text that made my stomach flip wasn't even from my mom or Matt. It was from my cousin Jenna. We aren't especially close, but she's one of those people who always seems to know what's going on before anyone else. Her message was short. "You're not going to like what you see." Channel 5. I opened the live stream on my phone, my heart already pounding. The camera showed a shaky shot of flashing police lights outside what looked like a hotel entrance. The news ticker at the bottom scrolled in big block letters. "Police raid strip hotel. Multiple detained in luxury suite." The anchor's voice was calm, but had that edge reporters get when they know they've got a big story. I almost dropped my phone when I saw the next frame. It was grainy, but clear enough. Matt, in his stupid Vegas shirt, being led through the lobby by 2 officers. Behind him, my mom was half covering her face with her hand, and my dad was arguing with someone just outside the shot. Lisa leaned closer. "Is that?" I nodded slowly, my throat tightening. "Yep, that's them." But as shocking as it was to see my family on the news for what the anchor was now calling an investigation into fraudulent casino activities, it wasn't the part that broke me. That came 5 minutes later, when the reporter explained how the police had been tipped off. They were reportedly using a stolen credit card belonging to a local college graduate who had reported suspicious charges earlier this week, the anchor said. It took me a second to process. Local college graduate. Reported suspicious charges. My brain made the leap, but my mouth still said it out loud, as if hearing it would make it more real. They used my card. I'd had my debit card skimmed once before, so at first I thought maybe it was just bad luck. But when I pulled up my bank app, the pit in my stomach turned into something heavier, something hot, like anger. There it was, clear as day. A $1,200 charge at a luxury Vegas hotel, processed the day before. My card, the same one I'd been using to scrape together the last of my tuition payments. My hands shook as I scrolled back through my transactions. There were more: dinner at a high-end restaurant, spa services, even a helicopter tour. My parents didn't have that kind of money, and neither did Matt. And then I remembered something that made my skin crawl. A week earlier, Mom had called asking for my new address so she could send me a graduation gift. She'd been weirdly insistent about me reading the numbers off my mailbox when I said I wasn't sure of the exact format. I'd brushed it off at the time, thinking she was just being her usual controlling self. But now I realized she must have been fishing for information to reset my online banking security. Lisa must have read it on my face. "They stole from you, didn't they?" I could only nod. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest, heavier than their absence, heavier than the years of favoritism. This wasn't just them being dismissive or selfish. This was deliberate, planned. They hadn't just skipped my graduation. They'd used it as an opportunity to fund their Vegas getaway with my money. I sat there in that cafe, the sounds of clinking cups and low chatter blurring around me. My mom's texts kept coming in, alternating between frantic demands and feigned concern. "Alex, you have to answer. We need to talk about this. They're making it look worse than it is." And then, the final gut punch, Matt's message, which I opened without thinking. "Don't blow this out of proportion. We'll pay you back eventually. Family sticks together." That was the moment something inside me hardened. Whatever thread had kept me tethered to the idea of family loyalty snapped clean. This wasn't loyalty. It was exploitation, dressed up as obligation. And they had just handed me every reason I needed to stop playing the part they'd assigned me since childhood. But before I could even decide what to do next, another notification lit up my phone. One that would turn all this simmering anger into a plan I hadn't even considered before. The notification wasn't from my family this time. It was from my bank. A fraud alert. I already knew what it would say, but reading it made my chest feel like it was caving in. Multiple suspicious transactions detected. Account temporarily frozen. Please contact us. Frozen. That one word was enough to make my stomach twist. I'd been counting on that account to cover rent next week, my phone bill, and the last payment on my student loan before the interest kicked back in. Without it, I had maybe $40 in cash and a small emergency fund that wouldn't last a week. I excused myself from the table, muttering something to Lisa about needing a second, and stepped outside. The air felt heavier now, the late afternoon warmth sticking to my skin as I called the bank. I went through the endless menu options, explained the situation to a tired-sounding representative, and listened as she told me it could take up to 10 business days for the investigation to resolve. 10 days. 10 days of not knowing if I'd be able to pay my bills, buy groceries, or even get to work if I needed gas. I felt this dull, hollow ache in my chest. Not panic exactly, just a heavy weight pressing down on me. When I hung up, I just stood there on the sidewalk, staring at nothing. It wasn't just the financial hit that hurt. It was knowing they'd done this, knowing full well how close I was to the edge. They'd watched me struggle through school, working nights and weekends, skipping meals to make rent. And still, they'd taken. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a fog. Lisa offered to help, even tried to insist on paying my rent until the account was fixed, but I couldn't bring myself to say yes. I didn't want another person to swoop in and save me. I wanted to fix this myself, even if I didn't yet know how. That night, I sat in my apartment, the silence so thick it felt like it was pressing in on me. The graduation cap sat on my kitchen counter, the tassel tangled like it couldn't quite fall into place. I thought about throwing it in a drawer, maybe even in the trash. What was the point of celebrating when the people who should have been there had turned it into the worst day of my life? I let myself sink into that low place for a while. I didn't answer calls, didn't look at texts, didn't post anything online. I figured if my family wanted me so badly, they could sit with their own panic for a while. But in the middle of that stillness, something started to shift. Maybe it was the bitterness settling into clarity, or maybe it was the fact that I'd finally stopped expecting them to change. Either way, I started seeing things differently. They'd taken from me, yes. They'd humiliated me, yes. But they'd also handed me something without realizing it. Proof. Proof of what they were willing to do, how far they'd go, and how little they thought of me. And proof, in the right hands, could be powerful. I opened my laptop. Not to post on social media, not to rant, but to start collecting everything. Bank statements, screenshots of their messages, even the video clip from the news site. I didn't know exactly where this was headed yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this slide. If they thought I'd just absorb the hit and keep quiet for the sake of family, they were about to find out I'd learned something very different in my years away from them. Silence can be a weapon too, if you know how to use it. And I was ready to start sharpening it. The first few days after graduation, I kept my head down. I went to work, came home, and quietly built my case. Every evening, I'd sit at my desk with my laptop and a mug of tea, combing through transaction logs and saving screenshots. My phone stayed on silent. Their missed calls piled up like unanswered debts. But outside of the chaos they'd caused, something unexpected was happening. Life was moving forward for me. The Monday after the ceremony, my department chair called to tell me I'd been recommended for a position in a local startup that specialized in educational technology. It was the kind of role I'd dreamed about, creative, meaningful, and offering a salary that could finally get me out of the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. The interview was scheduled for Wednesday, and when I walked in, portfolio in hand, I was a different person from the one sitting in that cafe with Lisa just days earlier. I was focused, composed, and maybe even a little sharper from the quiet anger still simmering beneath the surface. By Friday, I had the offer in writing, more than I'd been making in both my jobs combined. Once I had that offer letter, something in me settled. It was like standing on solid ground for the first time in years. My frozen account was still in limbo, but I knew I had an incoming paycheck that would dwarf what they'd taken from me. And that meant I could think clearly, plan carefully, and not make a single move out of desperation. That's when the shift started, not just financially, but socially. Lisa, proud as ever, told some of her friends about my graduation and new job. Word spread through her circle, and suddenly, I was getting congratulatory emails from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old classmates messaged me, saying they'd seen my name mentioned in a local alumni newsletter. It wasn't viral fame, but it was enough to make me realize something crucial. My story was starting to exist without my family in it. I started showing up differently. At work, I volunteered for projects that put me in front of important clients. I reconnected with a few professors who offered to write me glowing references for future opportunities. I even started a small side project, a blog sharing tips for students balancing school and work, that began picking up traction faster than I expected. And the more my life began to expand, the more their world seemed to shrink. I saw it in small ways at first. Matt stopped posting pictures from Vegas. My mom's Facebook went unusually quiet. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. They were dealing with something, and I had a pretty good idea what. The bank finally called with good news. The investigation had concluded, and the charges were confirmed as fraudulent. My account was restored, the stolen funds returned in full. They wouldn't tell me the details about who was responsible, privacy laws, they said, but I didn't need the confirmation. I already knew. The old version of me might have taken the win and let it go. But the new version of me, the one with a stable income, growing connections, and a public reputation that was quietly gaining weight, that version wasn't in a rush. I could afford to wait, to watch, to plan every step with precision. Because if there's one thing I'd learned in these last few weeks, it's that power doesn't always come from money or status. Sometimes, it comes from knowing you can drop the truth at the exact moment it will cause the most damage, and watching the ripples spread. And my moment was coming. I could feel it. It was almost 2 weeks after graduation when the real opportunity presented itself. By then, I had slipped into a rhythm. New job training during the day, blog writing in the evenings, quiet observation of my family's slow unraveling in between. I wasn't pushing anything. I was letting the pieces fall where they naturally wanted to go. The opening came from a place I didn't expect, my new company's legal department. We were in a meeting about data privacy and fraud prevention when one of the senior legal advisors, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Karen, gave a presentation on how businesses handle internal theft and financial disputes. She mentioned that while banks have to keep certain case details private, victims can access specific records through a legal request if the fraud was tied to a crime reported in public media. The moment she said that, it was like a switch flipped in my mind. The Vegas incident had been all over the news. That meant those records, the ones linking my stolen funds directly to the people in that hotel suite, could potentially be accessed by me. Not just vague suspicions, not just assumptions, actual, documented proof. That night, I started researching. I found out that because the Vegas police had made public statements about the raid, I could file a request under Nevada's public records law. If the documents connected the fraudulent card charges to the police report, I'd have everything I needed, not just to confirm it for myself, but to show anyone else who might doubt it. While I was piecing that together, life kept handing me more leverage. My blog's audience was growing fast, faster than I'd planned. A well-known education influencer shared one of my posts on Twitter, and overnight my follower count doubled. Suddenly, I wasn't just some recent graduate trying to figure things out. I was being invited to speak on student webinars, collaborate on articles, and contribute to online panels. My name was starting to mean something in circles my family couldn't touch. That visibility mattered for one reason. Anything I said now carried more weight. If I shared a story about financial betrayal or exploitation, people would listen, and they wouldn't just dismiss it as family drama. They'd see it as a cautionary tale, as advice from someone who'd been through it and come out stronger. And here's the thing about my family. They're obsessed with image. My mom lives for Facebook likes. Matt thrives on being the center of attention at family gatherings, and my dad's pride is tied up in the illusion that we're all a picture-perfect unit. They can ignore me in private, but they hate looking bad in public. So as I drafted the public records request, I started thinking bigger. This didn't have to be a one-step move. It could be a chain reaction. I could time the release of the proof with a story that would ripple through both my growing audience and our extended family, the same people they'd tried to poison against me before graduation. By the end of that week, the request was filed, the paperwork neatly documented, and my online presence stronger than it had ever been. I was in no rush. The longer I waited, the more their silence would gnaw at them, the more desperate their calls would get, and the more it would eat away at that carefully polished image they'd worked so hard to protect. All I had to do was wait for the envelope that would arrive in the mail, the one that would give me the final piece I needed to turn their Vegas getaway into something they'd never lived down. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. Plain manila, no frills, just my name typed neatly in the center. I took it inside, set it on my kitchen table, and stared at it for a good minute before opening it. Inside was exactly what I'd been waiting for. The official Vegas police incident report. The language was dry, but the details were everything. The report confirmed that my debit card number had been used to book the luxury suite. It listed the date and time of each transaction, matching perfectly with the charges on my bank statement. It even included surveillance stills from the hotel lobby showing my mom, dad, and Matt checking in. At the bottom, under cardholder contacted, there was my name and the notation, confirmed unauthorized use. Provided statement. It was irrefutable. They hadn't just borrowed my card like Matt tried to frame it. They'd committed fraud, and now it was sitting in black and white in my hands. I didn't rush. That night, I drafted a post for my blog. Not a direct, here's my family's dirty laundry kind of post, but a carefully written piece titled When the People You Trust Exploit You. My graduation week story. I wrote about the emotional side first. The missed ceremony, the family's absence, the bank account frozen at the worst possible time. I kept it personal, raw, and honest. Then, toward the end, I transitioned into the facts. I laid out the timeline, the charges, and, without using their names, described the hotel raid that had been on the local news. I embedded one of the grainy stills from the public report. It didn't need to be crystal clear. Anyone who knew them would recognize them instantly. And anyone who didn't know them personally would still feel the punch of the story. The next morning, I hit publish. The reaction was immediate. My followers flooded the comments with support. People shared their own stories of betrayal, of family members who'd taken advantage of them. The post got picked up by a popular personal finance blog that linked back to my site, calling it a powerful reminder that financial abuse can happen anywhere, even within your own home. Within hours, I started getting texts from extended relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Is this about your family? I can't believe they'd do this to you. I saw the pictures. I'm so sorry. Then came the fallout on their end. Matt's Instagram went dark. My mom deleted her Facebook entirely. A mutual cousin told me there'd been a screaming match at my parents' house, my dad accusing me of trying to ruin the family's name, my mom insisting they never thought it would go this far. Apparently, a few of their friends had already called them out after recognizing them in the still shot from the report. But the part that satisfied me most wasn't the social media silence or the angry voicemails. It was the quiet shift in tone from the very people who'd dismissed me before. Aunts and uncles who once repeated my mom's too sensitive narrative were now openly saying things like, "You've been through a lot and handled it with grace." Lisa, ever the cheerleader, told me, "You didn't even have to name them. You just showed the truth and let people see it for what it was." And that's exactly what I'd wanted. No screaming matches, no dramatic confrontations. Just the undeniable facts, presented to the world in a way they couldn't control or spin. By the end of that week, I had more job offers in my inbox, more speaking requests for my blog, and more messages of support than I could keep up with. Meanwhile, they were stuck in damage control, scrambling to salvage their reputations. And the best part? I still hadn't said their names. That was the power move. They knew I could if I wanted to. And now, they had to live with the fact that I might. The silence from my family didn't last long. By the second week after I'd posted the story, the pressure had boiled over. Word had spread far beyond our circle. Parents at Matt's kids' school were whispering. Neighbors were making offhand comments about Vegas. And even some of my mom's church friends had reached out to me privately to say they were praying for me. The first crack came when Matt's job called him in for a conversation. He'd been up for a promotion at the small real estate office where he worked, but after a client recognized him from the photo in my blog post and mentioned it to management, the promotion disappeared. A few weeks later, so did his job. My mom was next. She'd been volunteering as the treasurer for a local community group, the same group she bragged about constantly. The board voted to remove her after members expressed concerns about trustworthiness. Lisa told me my mom cried in the parking lot for 20 minutes before driving off. My dad took the longest to feel the impact, but when it came, it was brutal. His company relied heavily on word-of-mouth business, and several longtime clients quietly pulled their contracts. A couple even cited recent family controversies as the reason. It wasn't enough to ruin him financially, but it left a dent in his pride that I knew would never fully heal. They tried reaching out again, this time with apologies. Half-hearted ones. My mom sent a long message about how families should forgive each other. Matt texted me that he'd learned his lesson, and my dad suggested we move past this. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I sent them each a single email with the police report attached. No subject line, no message in the body, just the proof, in case they ever wanted to pretend it didn't happen. Life moved on for me quickly after that. My job flourished, my blog became a reliable source of income, and I eventually moved into a bigger apartment in a better part of town. I built a circle of friends who celebrated my wins without trying to diminish them, who showed up when they said they would. As for my family, I heard through the grapevine that they still don't talk about Vegas. They tell people it was a misunderstanding, but the people who matter know the truth. And they know it because I made sure of it, without screaming, without threats, without lowering myself to their level. I didn't need to destroy them. I just had to hold up a mirror and let them watch themselves fall apart. And the best part? Every time they look in that mirror, they'll see me standing there, cap, gown, and the diploma they didn't bother to show up for. I never expected to be fighting over my own house with my own father. But here we are. For context, I, 32M, bought my first home last year. It wasn't a mansion or anything, but it was mine. A cozy little 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. I worked hard for years, saving every penny while watching my older sister, Emily, 35F, get handed everything on a silver platter. Our parents always favored her, but I never thought it would come to this. A few weeks ago, my dad called and asked if he could drop by. I didn't think much of it until he showed up with Emily in tow, both looking unusually smug. We sat down in my living room, and after some small talk, my dad dropped the bombshell. Dad, so, your sister's been going through a really tough time lately, and we've been thinking you should give her your house? I actually laughed. Like, out loud. Me, what? Emily just sat there with her arms crossed, looking bored. Like this was already a done deal, Dad. She needs it more than you do. You don't have a family, you don't have kids. This house is too much for just one person. She's struggling right now, and it would be the right thing to do. Now, to clarify, Emily is not struggling. She's just irresponsible. Our parents gave her a house 5 years ago, a beautiful 3-bedroom place in a much nicer neighborhood than mine. But what did she do? She sold it within a year, blew through the money on business ventures, aka pyramid schemes and impulsive spending, and has been living off our parents ever since. And now they wanted me to clean up her mess. Again. Me, no, absolutely not. Dad's face turned red. Emily scoffed. Emily, ugh, I knew you'd be selfish about this. Me, selfish? I bought this house with my own money. I didn't get a free house handed to me and throw it away. Dad, watch your tone. She's your sister. You have a responsibility to help her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was their responsibility to enable her, and now that they were running out of ways to bail her out, they expected me to sacrifice everything I worked for? Then Dad pulled out his trump card. Dad, if you don't do this, don't expect to see a cent from me when I'm gone. I'll cut you out of my will. Oh no. Anyway, at this point, I was done playing nice. I stood up, walked to my office, and pulled out a neatly organized folder from my filing cabinet. When I came back, I dropped the paperwork on the table in front of them. Not me. Go ahead. Cut me out. Because guess what? Emily's already taken her inheritance. Dad blinked. Emily went pale. Me. That house you gave her? The one she sold for cash? That was worth more than anything left in your estate. She's already gotten her share. I, on the other hand, have gotten nothing from you my entire life. So go ahead. Write me out. But don't come knocking when you need help, because I won't be there. Silence. Dead silenced. Emily's jaw clenched. Dad's face went from red to ghost white. And then, Dad snapped, "How dare you throw that in our faces? After everything we've done for you?" I let out a bitter laugh. Everything they've done for me? That was rich. Really? Everything you've done? Because from where I'm standing, the only thing you've ever done is bend over backward for Emily while expecting me to just deal with it. Emily, finally shaking off the shock, slammed her hands on the table and practically screeched, "That house was a gift. You can't put a price on family support." Then I told her, "Sure, but apparently you can put a price on mine. And it's exactly one house." Dad pointed a finger at me, voice low but furious. "You ungrateful brat. You'd rather see your own sister homeless than help her out? Now, let's get one thing straight. Emily wasn't homeless. She had been living in our parents' guest house for free since she blew through the money from selling her house. She had no rent, no bills, and no responsibilities. Meanwhile, I had worked my ass off for everything I had. And now they wanted to rip it away from me because Emily didn't feel like being an adult? I shook my head. You know what? This conversation is over. I'm not giving her my house. And if you're going to cut me out of your wool over this, go ahead. Because I don't need anything from you. I stood up, walked to the front door, and opened it. Now get out of my house. Dad's eyes widened like he couldn't believe I was actually kicking them out. You can't be serious. Dead serious. This is my house. And I'm done with both of you. Emily got up in a huff, grabbing her designer handbag, probably bought with Dad's money, and stormed out first. Dad hesitated for a moment, as if expecting me to back down. But when he saw that I wasn't budging, he finally muttered something about me being a disappointment and followed Emily out the door. I shut it behind them and locked it. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that they saw reason and left me alone. But no, the real war was just beginning. Because a few days later, I found out that Dad wasn't just cutting me out of the will, he was trying to take my house. A few days passed, and I thought that was the end of it, that I had finally shut the door, literally and figuratively, on my father and Emily's entitlement. I was wronged. IT started with a phone call from my realtor. "Hey, I just got a weird inquiry about your house. Someone claiming to be your father asked if the property title was in your name or still under family ownership." I nearly dropped my phone. Family ownership? What the hell was he talking about? I reassured my realtor that the house was 100% mine and hung up. But something felt off. Why would my dad, who had no financial stake in my home, be sniffing around like this? Then, that very night, I got a notification from my security cameras. Motion detected. Front door, and my stomach dropped. I pulled up the footage on my phone, and there they were, Emily and my dad, standing on my front porch. With a locksmith, I immediately turned on the microphone function and spoke through the camera. "Can I help you?" The locksmith literally jumped when he heard my voice, looking around in confusion. My dad, however, didn't even flinch. "We're just checking something, son. Don't make this difficult." Emily was smirking, arms crossed like she had already won. "Checking what, exactly?" I asked. The locksmith hesitated. They said they were the owners, that they lost their keys and needed the locks changed." Oh, hell no. I quickly grabbed my car keys and sped home. I was furious. If I hadn't gotten that notification, I don't even know what I would have come back to. Would they have moved in, changed the locks, thrown my stuff onto the street? When I pulled up, the locksmith was still standing there awkwardly, clearly realizing he'd been lied to. I said, "You don't live here, and you sure as hell don't own this house." The locksmith looked at me, then at my dad, then back at me. Locksmith then asked me, "Sir, do you have proof of ownership?" I pulled out my phone and opened my property deed. This is my name on the title. Not his. Not hers. Mine. The locksmith immediately stepped back and muttered an apology. Dad, however, wasn't backing down. He said, "You have no right to treat me like this. I raised you. I provided for you. And this is how you repay me?" I chuckled. "By stopping you from committing literal fraud?" "Yeah, I guess so." Emily groaned, clearly losing patience. "Dad, let's just call the cops. He can't just kick us out of our own house." I laughed, like full-on bent over, wheezing laughter. "Your own house? You really believe that?" She shrugged. "Dad said it's still technically the family's." And there it was. Their real planned I'm my father. This man who spent my whole life favoring Emily, handing her everything while giving me nothing, actually thought he could just will my house into existence as family property. At this point, I was done being polite that I said, "All right, let's call the cops." Dad and Emily froze that I laughed. "Oh, what's wrong? I thought you wanted to call them? You think they'll agree with you? That they'll just kick me out of my own home?" Dad's eyes darted toward his car, clearly debating whether he should just leave. "But Emily," she doubled down, "you can't prove this house wasn't meant for me. Dad said he always planned for me to have it." "Oh, that was cute." I pulled out my phone, tapped a few times, and pulled up the emails from my bank. "Oh, really? Because according to my mortgage records, I took out a loan. And according to my closing documents, I signed the deed. And according to this wire transfer, I made the down payment. Not you. Not Dad. Me." Emily's mouth snapped shut. I added, "So please, call the cops. I'd love for them to hear you try to explain how you're entitled to a house you have absolutely no legal connection to." Dad grabbed Emily's arm. "Let's go." Emily hesitated, but Dad yelled, "Now?" They stormed off, Emily seething, Dad muttering something under his breath. I stood there, arms crossed, watching them drive away. As their car disappeared down the street, I took a deep breath, trying to calm the rage boiling inside me. Then, I turned to the locksmith. He was already loading his tools into his truck, clearly eager to get the hell out of there. "Not so fast. Hey, we need to talk." He flinched but tried to play it cool. "Look, man, I didn't know." "You didn't know? That's your excuse?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "They told me it was a family home and that they'd lost their keys. It happens all the time. People get locked out." I cut him off. "And you didn't think to check? No ID? No proof of ownership? Just some random guy saying, 'Yeah, I totally own this place, and you're ready to start drilling?'" He had the nerve to look annoyed. "Look, I don't need this. I didn't even start working yet." "Oh, hell no. You showed up at my house. You pulled out your tools. You were about 5 seconds away from breaking in." He held up his hands. "I get it, okay? I should have asked for ID first." I took a step closer. "Damn right you should have. If I hadn't caught you, you would have changed my locks for 2 people who were about to illegally move into my house." He sighed loudly, like he was the one being inconvenienced. "Fine, I'll be more careful next time. Are we done?" I narrowed my eyes. "Not even close. Give me your business card." That got his attention. "Why?" "Because I want the name of the company that almost helped my dad commit fraud." His jaw tightened. "Come on, man. I didn't know. I was just doing my job." "And your job requires verifying ownership before drilling into someone's door, right?" Silenced, I held out my hand. "The card. Now." He let out a frustrated breath, yanked a card from his pocket, and slapped it into my palm. "Thanks. Oh, and by the way, if I ever catch you trying to break into my house again, I won't just be having a conversation. I'll be calling the cops." He muttered something under his breath, climbed into his truck, and peeled out of my driveway. I looked down at the card. Time to make some phone calls. I walked back inside, still gripping the locksmith's business card. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from sheer rage. Dad and Emily had actually tried to break into my house. Not just manipulate, not just guilt trip. Break in. I needed to make a few calls. First, I dialed the locksmith's company. A woman answered, sounding cheerful. "Thanks for calling, company name. How can I help you?" "Yeah, I need to file a complaint. One of your guys just showed up at my house and was about 5 seconds from drilling my lock because 2 random people told him to." No verification, no proof of ownership, nothing. He was about to help them illegally break into my home. There was silence for a moment. Then, in a much more serious tone, she said, "That definitely shouldn't have happened. Do you have the technician's name?" I read off the name on the card. "We take this very seriously. I'll escalate this to management immediately." Good. Because if I ever see one of your locksmiths doing something like this again, I won't be calling customer service. I'll be calling the police and my lawyer. She stammered out an apology, but I'd already hung up. Next, I needed to make a legal move. I called my lawyer. Yeah, I have one, because family drama like this teaches you to be prepared. After explaining what had just happened, he didn't sound the least bit surprised. "Your father and sister tried to commit fraud. You need to file a police report. Even if you don't want them arrested, having a record of this will protect you in case they try something again." He was right. They weren't going to stop unless I made them stop. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the police station. I walked into the police station, still gripping the locksmith's business card like it was evidence in a murder case. My mind was racing. I didn't want to get law enforcement involved in family drama, but Dad and Emily had crossed a line. Approaching the front desk, I took a deep breath. I need to file a report. My father and sister just tried to break into my house. The officer at the desk raised an eyebrow. "Do you have proof?" I laid it all out. The locksmith's involvement, my dad and Emily's entitlement, how they had almost gotten inside. I even showed him the security footage from my phone, which clearly captured my dad standing by while the locksmith prepped his tools. The officer nodded. "Yeah, that's definitely an unlawful entry attempt. You're the legal owner of the house, right?" I pulled out my paperwork. "My name's the only one on the deed." He studied it for a moment, then looked back at me. "We can file this as an attempted unlawful entry. Since they didn't actually break in, it's not full-blown trespassing. But if they try this again, they're looking at serious charges." That was exactly what I needed. A paper trail. After signing the necessary forms, I walked out of the station feeling lighter, but I knew this wasn't over. Sure enough, my phone buzzed the second I got in my car. Dad, I let it go to voicemail. Seconds later, Emily's name popped up on the screen. I ignored her too. A minute later, a text from her came through. "You called the police on Dad? What is wrong with you?" I stared at my screen, disbelief morphing into amusement. "Oh, this is going to be fun," I typed back. "He tried to break into my house. Actions have consequences." Her response came instantly. "Oh my God, you're so dramatic. You know Dad just wanted what was best for the family." "Oh, I was done playing nice." "No, Dad wanted what was best for you. He thought he could steal my house, and you let him. Guess what? Now there's a report filed. Try this again, and I'll press charges." A few dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Finally," she sent. "You'll regret this." I laughed. "Oh, Emily, you have no idea." I started my car and headed home. It was time to prepare for the next round, because this fight wasn't over. I pulled into my driveway, still buzzing with adrenaline from the police station. As I stepped out of my car, I felt the weight of the moment. The ball was in my court now. I'd set everything in motion, and there was no going back. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Dad. I didn't even hesitate before opening it. He texted, "I don't know what you're trying to pull here, but I'm not going to let you ruin your life over a misunderstanding. You'll regret this." I stared at the screen, feeling that familiar mix of anger and disbelief. How could he still act like I was the one in the wrong? He had no shame. I tapped out a quick response. "It's not a misunderstanding, Dad. You tried to steal my house. I'm not going to let you get away with it." A few minutes passed, and then my phone buzzed again. Dad texted, "You've crossed a line. You're going to regret this. Don't expect anything from me ever again." That was when I realized the real threat wasn't even the house or the police report. It was the will. That I hadn't thought about it until now. But Dad had always talked about how everything was supposed to go to Emily. And if I was being honest, I'd always suspected he might cut me out of it eventually. But now, it felt like a certainty. I couldn't let him have the last word. I called my lawyer. "Hey, it's me again. Can we talk about my father's will?" The lawyer was quick to respond. "Sure. What's on your mind? Do you think there's a way to ensure that my share of the inheritance is protected? I'm worried about Dad making changes behind my back. especially with all the threats he's making. There was a pause on the line. We can look into that. You have a right to your inheritance, and if he's been making threats or pressuring you, it's possible to make sure those changes don't go through. But we'll need to take action fast, especially if he's already started manipulating Emily. I hung up, feeling a surge of determination. I wasn't going to let them win this. I was done being the victim in their twisted family game, so I walked back into my house. I couldn't help but notice how much my surroundings had started to feel like my personal fortress. I had built this place for me, and no one was going to take it away. But then, as I turned to lock the door behind me, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car engine approaching. I looked out the window. Dad's car, he was here. And I knew this confrontation was about to get a whole lot messier. I stood there, staring out the window at Dad's car creeping down the street. The engine cut off, and I could already picture him. The same smug look he always wore when he thought he was in control. Not this time. I took a deep breath and walked to the door, opening it just as Dad stepped onto the porch. His face was a mask of anger and resentment. He didn't even knock, just barged right in like he had a right to be here. "Is this how you're going to play it?" He spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You're going to ruin your life over this?" I didn't flinch. "No, Dad. I'm just making sure you can't ruin mine anymore." His eyes narrowed. "What the hell are you talking about?" I stepped closer, putting a few inches of distance between us. "You've already tried to steal my house, tried to break in with Emily's help. But that's not all. I called the cops, filed a report. I've got proof. You can't keep getting away with this crap, and you're sure as hell not going to get your hands on this house." His face paled. "You're just being dramatic. I'm your father. I'm entitled to some help from my kids. You lost that entitlement the second you tried to screw me over. And don't think I haven't figured out your game." I leaned in, voice low. "You're going to try and change your will, right? Cut me out and leave everything to Emily. But guess what?" He blinked, eyes wide with a mix of fear and confusion. "I've already had a lawyer look into it. You don't get to play that game anymore." I smiled, a cold, vindictive smile. "If you try to make any changes to your will now, I'll contest it. I've got the paperwork, and I'll make sure the court knows exactly what you tried to do." His jaw clenched. "You think you can just stop me? You're nothing without me." I shook my head. "No, Dad. I'm something without you. I've built my own life, and I don't need you or your toxic control to survive." He stood there, fuming, but I could see the panic in his eyes now. The realization was hitting him that I wasn't the gullible child he could manipulate anymore. "And if you think I'll let you walk away from this without consequences, you're wrong. I'm not going to call the cops again, but don't think I won't take further legal action. You've tried to steal from me, emotionally manipulate me, and now you're going to face the fallout." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "I hope you enjoy what's left of your life, because it won't be a pleasant one. You've burned too many bridges to come back from this." Dad stood there for a long moment, eyes shifting between anger and panic. Finally, he muttered something under his breath and turned to leave. But before he walked out the door, he shot one last look at me. "You're going to regret this." I simply smiled back. "I already feel better." The door slammed shut behind him, and as I locked it, I finally let out a long breath. It was over. The revenge, the sweetest revenge, wasn't in the dramatic confrontation or the threats. It was in the freedom to know I was no longer under his thumb. He tried to ruin my life. And now, I was making sure he never got the chance to do it again. And that's how I finally took control. How I made sure that, for the first time in my life, my father wouldn't get away with his entitled, manipulative behavior. The house was mine, the will was safe, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly free. What do you think, guys? Did I go too far with the revenge, or was it just a long overdue wake-up call for my dad and Emily? Would you have handled things differently? Let me know what you think. I'm curious to hear your take on this whole situation.